Hey guys, it's Mike here, and over the course of my time on YouTube, I have discussed some of the biggest theoretical and already pre-existing versus battles in the history of the Dragon Ball franchise. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down in depth the greatest versus battles in the Cell Saga, going into a deep dive of every single versus battle that comes up along the way and giving you my in-depth analysis. But before I begin, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications. That way you can stay up to date with all my future videos. Make sure to leave a like, share your own thoughts down below, and with that being said, let's get into the video. In Dragon Ball Z, there are some scenarios which, if they had gone another way, could have drastically changed the future of the Earth and the Dragon Ball story. As the way the story unfolded, even what appears to be a minor change can result in significant ramifications. In this video, I'll be taking a look at a what-if scenario from the Cell Saga, more specifically during the time after Goku had awakened from the heart virus. However, this video will not focus on Goku, but rather the Super Namekian Piccolo and the androids. And that scenario is, what if Piccolo fought Android 18 instead of 17 in Dragon Ball Z? Well, in this video, I'm going to break that down. Now, for context, after Goku had awakened and recovered from the heart virus, he met with the Z Fighters once again and informed them that he intended to surpass the Super Saiyan Wall and ascend to a new form. This was when he explained to Vegeta, who was in the midst of mental training after his humiliating defeat at the hands of Android 18, that there was a room in Kami's Lookout where a single day on Earth is equal to 1 year on the inside. After learning of this, Vegeta and his alternate timeline son, Future Trunks, entered the chamber, while Goku and Gohan waited outside and Piccolo and the others returned to the Kame house. However, this is when the androids arrived. Android 16, 17, and 18 were all looking for Goku, and after Piccolo informed them that Goku was not around, they demanded Piccolo tell them his location. This is when Piccolo devised a plan to fight the androids, and possibly take down Android 17 in a one-on-one fight. However, in this scenario, let's say that Piccolo instead chose to face off against Android 18. How exactly would this change the story? Well, I think this change could be significant, as if we examine the fight between Piccolo and Android 17, it appears that Piccolo had the advantage at first, as he was able to not only deal damage to 17, but appeared to have the advantage in both strength and speed. Although this could be because Android 17 was still holding back, and the two warriors went back and forth, exchanging blows in one of the best fights in the entire franchise. However, as the time wore on, Piccolo was showing the signs of fatigue as his stamina was decreasing, while Android 17's stamina is infinite. And this is where the fight left off, without a conclusive winner, as Imperfect Cell had arrived. And with his power, which came from absorbing further multitudes of people, he defeated Piccolo and went on to absorb Android 17. Of course, as we know, this would lead to his fight with Vegeta and eventually him becoming perfect. However, a question is whether or not he would have reached this point had Piccolo instead faced off against Android 18. After all, Android 18 was specifically designed by Dr. Gero to be weaker than 17. Compared to 17, her power was suppressed in order for her to be more obedient to Gero, which of course didn't end up working. However, nonetheless, it's apparent that both 17 and Piccolo were more powerful than she was at this point in the series. And if Piccolo faced off against 18, I think he'd stand a far greater chance of defeating her in a one-on-one fight, as if Piccolo can deal damage to Android 17, he should no doubt be able to deal damage to 18. In fact, for a point during their fight, Super Saiyan Vegeta was able to fight on par with 18 after she became serious, even heavily damaging her outfit. And Vegeta's defeat only came after Piccolo pointed out that his stamina was decreasing. which allowed 18 to overtake him and break both of his arms. So looking at it relatively, if Super Saiyan Vegeta at this point was even close to Android 18's level of power, then Piccolo's power should be more than enough to defeat her, as we know that Piccolo, after fusing with Kami and regaining the power he had as the nameless Namekian, adding it to his already impressive power, had surpassed both Goku and Vegeta at this point in the story. However, perhaps the biggest piece of evidence for Piccolo winning here comes from his fight against Android 17, as during their fight, Piccolo surrounded 17 with Ki Blasts, and then hit him all at once with them using his Hell Zone grenade technique. Piccolo was rather confident that this move would destroy 17. However, it was revealed at this point that 17 had a force field which he could use to shield himself from harm. The difference between 17 and 18, however, is that 18 has never shown this capability, so it's likely exclusive to her brother 17. Thus, if Piccolo used the Hell Zone grenade on 18, I think he could have won right there. Now, a question is whether or not the other androids will step in on their fight. However, as we saw, 17 fought Piccolo with no interference, and so it's likely that would happen here as well. And if he can unleash this move as quickly as he did against 17, I suspect that he would win before Cell arrives. However, once Piccolo defeats 18, this creates a very grim situation for him, as it's unlikely that 17 wouldn't try to kill him as revenge for his sister's death. And of course, Piccolo would no longer be fresh in this situation, so it's much less likely he could defeat 17, unless he could somehow fire off his light grenade or special beam cannon, which both take time to charge. And then there's the possibility of Android 16 fighting Piccolo, in which case he would wreck Piccolo just as easy as Cell did. And speaking of Cell, he would arrive at this point. However, in this scenario, Android 18 would be dead, thus he would have no realistic way of becoming perfect in the main timeline. However, there's still a possibility that he could absorb Android 17 as he did in the manga's story, in which case things would probably play out the same way here, as Cell becomes semi-perfect Cell and decimates the fighters around him. However, this time he probably wouldn't go around blowing up islands in order to find 18, but perhaps go on the hunt for Trunks' time machine to go to yet another timeline where 18 exists. However, this is when Vegeta and Trunks would emerge from the time chamber, and we would likely see the same events transpire, as Vegeta and Trunks fly off to face semi-perfect Cell. Now, as we saw in the real fight, Super Saiyan Grade 2 Vegeta decimated semi-perfect Cell, showing a clear advantage in strength and speed. And despite Cell trying his best, he was eventually forced to beg Vegeta to let him live, playing Vegeta's own pride against him, and using this to absorb Android 18. However, with Android 18 now dead, this wouldn't be an option, and I could see Vegeta or Trunks finishing Cell off. And this is where we enter what is really new territory for the series, as with Cell dead so soon, this creates a very different scenario than what we saw, with Perfect Cell defeating Vegeta and Trunks and eventually holding the Cell games. In this instance, the pseudo-tournament would never transpire. Rather, I think Vegeta's vendetta against Goku would once again take center stage, as Vegeta's goal all throughout Dragon Ball Z and up until this point had been to defeat and likely kill Goku, and it's not really until toward the end of the Buu saga that he more or less abandons this goal. And at this point in the Cell arc, Vegeta is likely still more powerful than Goku. However, Goku and Gohan were also still in the time chamber, and I suspect that Vegeta would allow them to finish training within the chamber in order to give himself a better fight, just like he did with Cell attaining his perfection. However, in this case, as well as that one, it would be a decision that would lead to his undoing, as once again Goku and Gohan would have exited the time chamber, with both being far above Vegeta and Trunks' level of power in their full-powered Super Saiyan form, a form which they spent much of their time within the room mastering. And as was demonstrated when Goku powered up for Korin, Vegeta wasn't even half as strong as Goku, and he was still weaker even after his second day in the chamber. Thus, if the two engaged in a fight, Goku would undoubtedly win. However, being Goku, I suspect that he would spare Vegeta's life once again, and Vegeta may retreat to lick his wounds. And after this, Goku would likely go to New Namek and have Dende return with him as the new guardian of the Earth, which would result in the Dragon Balls returning and Piccolo as well as the victims of Cell and the androids coming back to life. But this scenario would also significantly change what happens going forward, as Goku would still be alive on Earth and living with his family. He would never have had to intervene in Gohan and Cell's fight and sacrifice himself, and Gohan would not have gone Super Saiyan 2 during the Cell games, which would mean much of his hidden power would still lie dormant. However, Goku seemed to discover the depths of Gohan's power during their time training in the Time Chamber, which is backed up by the anime-only scene where Gohan seemingly goes beyond Super Saiyan. So it's possible that Goku would help train Gohan to access this power during the 7 years leading up to the Buu Saga, especially if Vegeta is still a looming threat throughout. And Goku would perhaps also take this opportunity to train Goten, as he would be present during these 7 years of his life. And this would no doubt result in Goten and perhaps Gohan being even stronger than they were heading into the next arc. But when we get to the next arc, some things would also change. For one, Goku likely wouldn't be as powerful as he was when he arrived during his one-day visit. This is because Goku had spent the past 7 years training in the afterlife, specifically Heaven, with King Kai and other masters. This is where Goku learned not only fusion, but how to become a Super Saiyan 2 and 3. Now I can see Goku attaining Super Saiyan 2, however Super Saiyan 3 is unlikely because Goku attained it while using a dead spiritual body, which had far less limitations than his living one. So this would mean that Goku, likely Vegeta, and possibly Gohan would all be Super Saiyan 2s. Then there's the fact that Vegeta also trained like a madman during the 7-year time skip, and this training allowed him to come close to the power that Goku had achieved in Heaven. However, as Goku was still stronger, Vegeta used the Majin boost from Babidi in order to become equal with him. However, if Vegeta trained with similar intensity to what he did while Goku was dead, he could very possibly surpass Goku by the time the Buu Saga rolls around. As much like during the 3-year time skip before the Cell Saga, Goku would probably be training outside, maybe with Gohan and Goten, and possibly even with King Kai on his planet. But Vegeta, on the other hand, would be training in a special gravity chamber under hundreds of times gravity. And like we saw in the beginning of the Cell arc, Vegeta had surpassed Goku as a result of this superior training. So if this is the case, I don't see Vegeta becoming Majin to face Goku, but rather Goku, Vegeta, or maybe Gohan in this case, would defeat Deborah and Babidi, and Buu would probably never be revived. And I'm not sure in this case that Vegeta would be goaded into allowing Buu to be revived either, as Vegeta seemed to believe that Buu was a weakling and no match for he and Goku before he was revived. Thus, it would likely be curtains for him. After this, I could see much of Dragon Ball Super turning out the same way. Beerus awakens and seeks the Super Saiyan God, Goku and Vegeta are defeated by him, Goku, or perhaps in this case Vegeta, becomes a Super Saiyan God, but still loses. They may go on to train with Whis, and Frieza would probably still be resurrected. And although Frieza would no doubt still train and achieve greater power, he wouldn't have the knowledge of Goku defeating Majin Buu, and thus may not train as long as he did prior, which could thus scale him down to Goku and Vegeta's adjusted power. However, considering just how powerful Vegeta became in 6 months training with Whis, it's possible that the difference in power between this and the current timeline Saiyans would become irrelevant. So there we have it. In this video, I addressed what would happen if Piccolo faced Android 18 instead of 17. And as I explained, many things would change significantly from how the story played out in the anime and manga. Although Piccolo himself may become largely irrelevant in the future of the story after this point, just due to how Toriyama wrote it to play out, this was a period of time when he was still very powerful and could have made a real difference. However, in this case, it came down to a simple matter of Piccolo fighting Android 17 instead of 18. But that's how Dragon Ball What Ifs typically play out, as even a minor change could make a big difference in how the story would unfold. And there is still many what-if scenarios just waiting to be explored, including one I have in mind featuring Gohan and his time on Namek. But that's a story for another day. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I want to discuss something that I have wondered about and many other fans have ever since the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z. And that relates to one of the best fights in the entire franchise, and definitely one of my top 5, especially when it comes to Dragon Ball Z. And that would have to be Piccolo versus Android 17, and who would have actually won the fight between the two of them. So what I'm going to be doing here in this video is going in depth into the fight, analyzing it panel by panel in the manga, and discussing in depth who I think would have won, with evidence for, against, and everything else along those lines. So let's get into that right now and start discussing that. So of course, as we know, what ended up happening in the Cell Saga was that after Piccolo merged and reunited with Kami, the god of the earth, taking the evil side and the good side at one point of King Piccolo and Kami, and reuniting them together into one body in the nameless Namekian, which we would just go on to call Piccolo, even though Goku called him Kamikolo at one point. The fact of the matter is Piccolo got a significant power boost, and this was able to propel him to the level of Android 17, the more powerful of the two different androids between him and 18. Of course, 16 was more powerful, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Nonetheless, what ended up happening is 17 and 18 showed up on Master Roshi's island, and so Piccolo, in this situation, had to fight him. So they went off to one of these nondescript islands that they always tend to find in Dragon Ball, somewhere in Micronesia or something, I don't really know, and they ended up fighting together in what ended up being one of the best fights overall. So of course, initially going into this fight, as we see, 17 doesn't think that Piccolo really stands any chance whatsoever. Of course, he seems to think he knows Piccolo's every move and all of his capabilities. But he couldn't be more wrong in this case, because as we would go to see, he would be proven wrong very shortly. After all, Piccolo goes on to fight the androids. He didn't really know that he was only going to be able to have a one-on-one fight. As you can see right here, Piccolo's surprised when he finds out that 17 is going to be fighting alone. So what ends up happening next? Well, Piccolo is able to, in turn, go on to fight against 17 right here. He powers up to his full power in this new bulked up form, this state that he has, not really a form. But nonetheless, what ends up happening is 16 is actually really surprised and taken off guard by the fact that Piccolo is so powerful. In fact, he even states, that's not Piccolo. And at this point, Piccolo rushes right behind 17, elbows him, knocks him down, kicks him, smashes his face right into the ground. He starts eating up that dirt right there and then. And, looks like Piccolo clearly has the advantage here. He goes to blast 17. And 17, however, gets out of the way, but not without taking some damage on his clothing, as you could see. And typically what that means in Dragon Ball is when you see somebody taking some real battle damage with regard to their clothes, and you could see the bloodied lip, that means that somebody is able to get through their general defenses. In other words, what that means is that, in Dragon Ball, people have what is kind of like a force field around them generated by their ki, or pure energy in the case of the androids, their augmented ki. So Piccolo was able to get right through there. Of course, 17 wasn't going all out at the time, but being able to get through 17's barrier is definitely something that's going to become more relevant as the fight goes on and when it comes to this analysis. We see Goku and Gohan are observing the fight from afar on top of Kami's lookout, waiting for them to go into the time chamber. Gohan wants to intervene, but Goku tells him not to. At this point, Piccolo, he gets right to business. He wants to kill 17 as soon as possible so that he could prevent Cell from becoming perfect and, of course, eliminate the stronger of the two threats androids that are trying to kill Goku and, bring about the dark future that we saw in Future Trunks' timeline. The way that he does this, well, he shoots a bunch of blasts into the sky. 17 is completely confused. He's like, what the heck's going on here? Why do you keep missing me? And, he even kind of mocks Piccolo in the anime version. You don't even know what you're aiming at, basically. But at this point, 16, you could see, is always aware of what's really going on in these fights. And, there's a good reason for that, which I'll get into soon as well. But what Piccolo was doing was actually enacting a plan right here, in which he activates his Hell Zone grenade, one of the coolest techniques that we see from him in the series, where he hits 17 with all these blasts simultaneously. They all explode in a massive chain reaction, which definitely should, according to Piccolo, have killed 17. You know, with the amount of power that he put into it, and with the amount of power we know 17 to be. However, there is one ace in the hole that 17 was hiding up until this point, or maybe Toriyama just thought of on the spot, which is his barrier. A force field, as Piccolo calls it, in which he's able to, in fact, negate the ability. And this is something we actually see Cell utilize later on during his fight against Goku, when Goku's hitting him with a barrage of Ki Blasts. So maybe it's possible that Cell inherited that ability from him. Wouldn't be surprised. Too bad. Close, but no cigar. So 17 right here is even admitting that he would be able to, in fact, have been defeated by Piccolo right there had he not used that barrier. So this is also another really interesting little aside that we could make here too, that kind of ties into 17's later characterization in the franchise, where he's saying, let's go somewhere else, we're destroying this island, save the Earth, you know? So 17, I guess he's kind of like a Sensui character, or maybe even Goku Black in the sense. He'll kill all the filthy mortals, but, you know, let's save the Earth. And then, you know, it's funny, in Super, he goes on to be a park ranger, although really he already kind of was that in the Buu Saga. Once again, Super doesn't really make that real significant character development. And at this point, you know, one of the biggest follies of this fight starts to materialize, which is Cell is able to sense the power of everything going on at the time. He knows that Piccolo must be fighting the androids, otherwise why would he be using all of his power, as we could see right here. So as a result, this is what leads Cell directly there. At this point, you know, 17 starts to praise Piccolo when they go to this next island. You're stronger than I thought. I'm guessing you're not Piccolo after all. Not that I care. I just want to know where Son Goku is. Are you going to tell me yet? Your plan is to kill Goku? Of course I'm not going to tell you. That's Piccolo's job. He already did it once. He's going to finish it eventually. Then we'll continue until you feel like talking. So 17, I guess, in this sense, isn't really trying to kill Piccolo, so that may be something that we could take into account. But nonetheless, he would have a really difficult time anyway. This is where the two of them get up really close and personal, and they start to have their one-on-one fight, almost kind of like what we saw in the hand-to-hand combat between between Goku and Frieza on Namek. And this is where we get an even more awesome part of the fight, where they're hitting each other with their shots, Piccolo's missing, and then we even get this awesome little shot of 17 when he punches Piccolo, that he actually is going really far into that and punching basically right through him. He's almost turning into like Plastic Man or Luffy at that point, where he's stretching with his body, Mr. Fantastic, I suppose you could say. And, you know, he's knocking Piccolo down, but Piccolo gets right back up, and what does he do at this point? He starts to dodge 17's attacks. And what he says here is, you're pretty fast, but your punch isn't much. What? Say, what do you think you're talking, or who do you think you're talking to? I'm the most powerful being on Earth. I guess you haven't heard of Cell yet. Well, obviously he hasn't. And that's another thing that maybe we can indicate right here, another possible theory as to the power output of the androids. For all we know with regard to the androids, sure, they always stay at a certain level of power in terms of not losing their energy, something that will become a factor in this fight later on. But another thing is, too, when it comes to their energy output, their damage output, is it really as significant as someone like a Piccolo, for instance, or someone like Goku or Vegeta when they're at a similar level to 17 in base power level, let's say, as a Super Saiyan or so on, but then they can amplify their power beyond that with like a Kamehameha, Big Bang, or Final Flash, or something like that. So that's another thing to take into account. Can the androids truly augment and amplify their power in the same sense that a Piccolo can? If not, then that's another thing that gives Piccolo an advantage here. Because even if he is as equally powerful as 17 in terms of his base power level, you could say, in terms of like his maximum that he'll be giving off if you were to have read a scouter of him, nonetheless, he might be able to put out even more energy than 17, which becomes a bigger factor too. And as we see the two of them start to fight again, 17's dealing damage, so is Piccolo, but Piccolo is starting to get a little bit more worn down as the fight goes on. The two of them are definitely having this sparring match. You know, Piccolo's putting out blasts, he's hitting 17, definitely dealing even more damage to him, but Piccolo starts to huff and puff. And not blow anyone's house down, but definitely huffing and puffing. Because as 17 says, even if we have equal strength, looks like your stamina's running low. My energy is infinite. And this is the point where Cell intervenes and stops one of the best fights in the franchise before it actually comes to its fitting conclusion. So the question here is, what exactly would have happened if this fight kept going? Of course, in terms of the narrative, you could say that perhaps 17 was going to win because, as he says right here, my energy is infinite and yours is running low. So as the fight would continue to go on, in terms of their power levels, if we have 17 right here, Piccolo right here, maybe even Piccolo started a little bit stronger than 17 based upon, some of what we see early on. The fact of the matter is that Piccolo would only continue to decline and decline and decline and decline over time, whereas 17 would always stay at that, 10 out of 10, whereas Piccolo would go 10, 9.8, 9.5, 9, 8, so on and so forth. However, that doesn't mean that Piccolo would actually lose because, like I mentioned before, Piccolo has the ability to amplify his ki output significantly with special attacks, like, for instance, the Special Beam Cannon. And that's one of the abilities that Piccolo never even attempted to use against 17 or the androids. At this point, that's another really powerful technique because not only is it a piercing technique that could go through someone's natural barrier, someone's natural force field, but it's very likely that it also would have been able to cut right through 17's force field that we see right here. After all, there was this kind of no limits fallacy that we saw in the Dragon Ball fandom for a very long time that people are like, oh, 17 could probably negate any energy attack that comes after him, but that's never really stated. And I feel like a sufficient enough attack likely would be able to get through that blast or that barrier, especially because the fact that we go on to see later on during the fight between Piccolo and Cell that this is something that is almost a certainty in my eyes, because when it comes to like a straight up fight, a brawl between the two of them, it is likely that 17 one-on-one would be able to take it because, like I mentioned before, the energy. However, there is abilities that Piccolo has, like the Special Beam Cannon, or something that's even more powerful as we see against Cell, which is that Piccolo goes on to fight Cell. Cell is vastly more powerful than him and everyone else at this point, except for Android 16, because of the fact that he had absorbed so many people, thousands, millions, who really knows at this point, but he definitely augmented his power significantly. The population of the Earth in Dragon Ball is a lot less than on our Earth because of, Piccolo having wiped out most of them when he was King Piccolo, but nonetheless, one of the things that happens is 17 starts playing around with him. He doesn't realize just how powerful Cell is. He's never even heard of this guy. And of course, 17 can't sense energy. So Piccolo jumps in. He's actually able to deal damage to Cell when he's caught off guard, despite the fact that Cell is way more powerful than him or 17. But it's at this point that we end up seeing Piccolo unleash his ultimate technique, the one at the time at least, which is his light grenade. And as you can see right here, he begins to charge it up. Of course, 16 knows it's not going to work because the fact that he knows how powerful he is, and he can kind of estimate how powerful Piccolo can put out his energy. But nonetheless, what happens? Piccolo charges up this ultimate technique, and you can immediately see the reaction on 17's face. He knows what's about to happen right here. He knows that this is going to be a technique that's in danger for him too. Way more dangerous than the Hellzone grenade that he utilized earlier in their fight. And what happens? He blasts it, and what does 17 do right here? He jumps right out of the way. He doesn't attempt to put up his barrier. He doesn't attempt to tank the blast or do anything like that. He's like, nope, I'm getting the heck out of Dodge because I know what that thing's going to do. And what happens at that point? We see this massive explosion. Well, not even a massive explosion, a massive blast take off, almost like akin to Vegeta's final flash after he blasted at Perfect Cell. And then we see, mushroom cloud forming. That island is obliterated in the area that he shot it. And look at 17's face one more time. 17 is completely shocked, stunned at the power that Piccolo put out. Same thing with 18. He knows that if that blast were to hit him, well, let's just say 17 wouldn't have fared anywhere near as well as Cell, because, as 16 points out, he's not even hurt. 18 thought for sure he would have wiped out Cell, even though Cell is more powerful than Piccolo and 17. But again, she can't sense ki, whereas 16 can. So, we do see that Cell defeats Piccolo, of course. He breaks his neck, blasts him in a very brutal fashion. You could even see all of his Namekian blood pouring out, chucks him into the water, die, trash, and he tosses him away. And at that point, we end up seeing this awesome fight taking place between 16 and Cell. But in terms of the fight again between Piccolo and 17, who would have been able to win out of the two of them had their fight not been interrupted by this dude in Dragon Ball Z, and of course the Dragon Ball manga? Well, when it comes down to the evidence of the two fighting, we do see that the two of them are evenly matched in terms of that base level of strength, as I mentioned before. They do have equal strength, which is even admitted to by 17. All the evidence is there. However, 17, although he does have that barrier I mentioned earlier, likely could not be able to match up to the power or tank the power of a Makanko Sappo, the special beam cannon, or that light grenade. And thus, as a result, I think that picture I showed you guys before of 17 jumping the heck out of the way immediately and, being totally shocked by the power that Piccolo put out is a great indicator to me that Piccolo would have been able to defeat 17 with this ultimate attack. He would have tired himself out. He would have, diminished himself a little bit by firing that blast off, because it is such a massive blast that would utilize so much of his on-hand energy. But nonetheless, if he hits 17, I don't think that barrier is going to matter, because 17 is going to probably be obliterated, or at the very least damaged to the point to where he could not continue to fight. So in terms of a one-on-one between the two, I think that Piccolo would have taken it. However, the truth of the matter is that the androids have always been a package deal. They are the two of them that come together with an intent of taking on and defeating an enemy. So if Piccolo was there and he was killing 17, basically, he was beating him down to the point where he's going to kill him, I really doubt that 18 wouldn't have intervened. Same thing when it comes to 16. If Piccolo is charging up that ultimate attack against Android 17, 16 is there sensing everything the entire time. He is completely aware of how powerful Piccolo would be able to send out that energy. He is completely aware that when Cell get blasted by Piccolo, that it doesn't actually defeat him, that he's totally unharmed. So, with that being said, considering the fact that 16 and Cell have the same level of power, it's very likely that 16 could have stepped in the way and blocked the light grenade or deflected the special beam cannon to save 17's life. Because at the end of the day, he is a robot that values the human life. He's like Arnold at the end of Terminator 2, right? He learned the value of human life, and he's going to make sure to protect it. Same thing for the value of animal life. So 17 and 18 are kind of like his friends. They're his colleagues, basically. They're his allies against Son Goku. And so as a result, is he going to really let Piccolo kill 17? I doubt it. Same thing with 18. There is a chance that, considering just how powerful that light grenade blast was, Piccolo probably could have even killed 18 and 17 at the same time, because, this blast probably went multiple times beyond his general level of power. It just was insignificant because the fact that, 17 or Cell was more powerful, and again, 16 was more powerful. So there's a chance Piccolo is going to win that fight. He's going to take out 17, maybe even take out 18 next, or at least, diminish himself by taking out 17 and eliminating the threat of perfect Cell entirely. But at that point, somebody steps in, they stop him, and they defeat Piccolo that way by ganging up on him. So overall, in terms of that fight, I would give the overall match to Piccolo. But with that being said, guys, when it comes to that fight, You guys can let me know down below in the comments what you think. Do you think that 17, or do you think that Piccolo would have won? Additionally, another thing is, what about Dragon Ball Super? Well, when it comes to Dragon Ball Super, it depends on the arc, of course. If it was their Tournament of Power, I would definitely say 17 could win, even though Piccolo was somewhere in the ballpark of Ultimate Gohan at that point. We saw just how powerful he was. But when it comes to 17, he was tanking blasts or attacks meant for Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Vegeta, who was way more powerful than Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 20 Goku near the start of the tournament when he fought Jiren. 17 is even said by Goku at the end of the Tournament of Power to possibly be more stronger than Goku. I don't know why I would say more stronger than Goku, because the fact that that's Goku at that point who unlocked Ultra Instinct multiple times in the same tournament too. But when it comes to Dragon Ball Super Superhero, and Piccolo gets 2 new abilities, 2 new transformations, and becomes, Goliath Piccolo, except he's orange, the fact is, I would give it to Piccolo at that point, but 17's taken advantage of that off-screen training, so who knows? Maybe he's, so powerful he could finger flick Jiren at this point. Difficult to say. Maybe he could even finger flick Orange Piccolo, although I know that Quaman would definitely hate that. Hey, Quaman, how's it going? But all right, guys, let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Who do you think would win, 17 or Piccolo? And also, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future. And I'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be doing another discussion about an unfinished fight in the Dragon Ball franchise. More specifically, one that took place in the Cell Saga, between the titular character of Cell, in this case Imperfect, and Android 16, the most muscular android according to Harold of all time. And who actually would have won if their fight was not interrupted and Android 17 didn't get absorbed by Cell, furthering his metamorphosis into perfection? Well, let's get into that right now. So the setting of this fight is going to be exactly where it took place in the original Dragon Ball section of this manga right here of the Cell Saga or Dragon Ball Z. The particular area in which we had just seen Piccolo and Android 17 fighting, and Cell appeared right here and proceeded to try and absorb Android 17 after putting down Piccolo. I'll be getting into some of these power estimates very soon. And what ended up happening, 16, he went to prevent Cell from absorbing 17, and in turn began their big fight. But before we get into this, I want to do a little bit of backstory on each of these characters for those who may not remember, and additionally just to give you more context as to how all of this will really flow and make sense in terms of their fighting styles, their abilities, and that much more. So let's start with Android 16, because for anyone who doesn't remember, or those who do, these breakdowns aren't only for those people who don't remember, by the way. I've seen this franchise a million times and read the manga tons of times too, but I don't always remember every single element, and I'm sure you don't either. But with that being said, when Trunks and Vegeta and everyone else went to fight Dr. Gero and destroy him before he was able to wake up 17 and 18, they got there a little bit too late. And that's what also led to the emerging of Android 16. When Dr. Gero and Android 17 were in the midst of an argument, what ended up happening, 16 or 18 in this case took notice of 16, saying, "Number 16, this is also an infinite model, isn't it?" And then she says, "But he's not like us. A little bigger for one. How else is he different?" This is going to play a key component in the fight later on, where Android 18 brings up the fact that 16 is at least likely a infinite energy model. Dr. Gero gets really defensive and tells her not to wake up Android 18, and that if they do, he might destroy the entire world, and that he's a experimental model and a failure. Android 18 questions, "You've left him around quite a while for a failure. You disposed of all the rest up through 15, which is why we don't see Androids 1 through 15 other than Android 8. Although there is a question of Major Metallotron, who is very similar in terms of his Arnold nature, and Harold feral nature to Android 16 was one of those numbered ones. But nonetheless, Gero says that he was going to fix Android 16 later, and that if they activate him, he'll risk killing them all. So the fact of the matter is, I discussed this more in depth in another video you could see in the top right corner, where I discussed where Android 16 is in the future in other timelines of Dragon Ball, and whether or not this was all kind of a ruse by Gero to keep 16 under wraps for now, because he was waiting to use him for a different contingency, which never really ended up happening. Nonetheless, what ended up happening, the androids wiped out Dr. Gero, they went to wake up 16, and what ended up happening, Trunks freaked out in his legendary scene as a legendary Super Saiyan blasted them, and it did nothing. Because they were able to wake up 16, he got out of his container, much bigger and much more muscular than all the other ones, and he proceeded to, look solemn, and not really do much else in terms of physicality, because he refused to do anything other than fighting Son Goku, which was his primary means of doing so. This is also, or his primary means of existing, or reason for doing so, his purpose, his modus operandi, if you will. But nonetheless, what ended up happening, we get more insight into what 16 is. And unlike 17 and 18, 16 is fully mechanical. He says right here that he was created from nothing, not based on a human male like Android 17 believed. And even Android 17 here says, I never knew Dr. Gero had the technology to create an android from nothing. Then why did he go back to cybernetics? Something that's never actually explicitly explained in the universe. Eventually, we end up seeing more of 16's power, on display as we see another fight occurring in this franchise, which is the fight between Piccolo and Imperfect Cell, where we find out that 16, unlike the other androids, actually has the ability to sense energy. As he states right here, they ask him who exactly is fighting. 16 states, I don't know, neither is in my databanks, but one of them rivals the two of you in power. So this goes to show that not only was 16 not able to necessarily make out that Piccolo was the Nameless Namekian now, because the quality and nature of his chi changed after he merged with Kami, but additionally, another thing is that Piccolo and Cell are both unknown fighters to him at this point. In other words, 16 doesn't know who Cell is. Neither do the other two androids, which is explained a little bit further on, which means that 16 doesn't have the advantage going into this fight that, somebody else might have had, knowing all of Cell's abilities, which makes it a little bit more difficult for him to deal with certain powers that Cell may have, which again, I'll get into very soon. But despite the fact that 16 is almost seemingly made out to be weaker than the other two androids because he lets them talk and act like they're more powerful than him, 16 is significantly above them, which goes on to be showcased when he goes up to fight Cell. Punching Cell, as we could see right here when he goes to absorb Android 17, Android 17 says, what are you doing, 16? You can't fight that thing. And if you do, you're going to take your own life, essentially. And what does he say right here? If I've calculated correctly, my power is equal to Cell's. So what about Cell's power here, actually? Just how strong is the imperfect, weakest form of Cell at this point in the story? Well, let's get back to Cell's introduction. Because, as anyone who remembers will recall, Cell is first debuted when Piccolo merges with Kami shortly after the discovery of the other time machine that came from 3 years after Trunks went back to the future in the original timeline and showed up 4 years before the androids arrived, which was 1 year before Trunks did, creating the main timeline in the process and essentially creating the history of Trunks timeline that the Trunks in this arc we see on screen is actually from. Did I blow your mind? But nonetheless, what ended up happening was that Cell was, when he initially debuted here, pretty powerful. Where he was able to withstand an attack from Piccolo, who stated that he wasn't holding back as the Nameless Namekian here, And additionally, not only was he able to do that with minimal burns, as we could see here, I don't know where that panel went. Hey guys, it's Mike from the future, and I'm using the magic of editing and time travel in order to show you that scene I was just referencing. When Piccolo uses this awesome blast after he said he was not going to hold back against Cell, we see this realized in a great way by Toriyama, not just in the manga, but also the anime, in which we see his eye kind of like, get tightened up. He knows exactly what's coming for him. This blast on display takes him out, except it doesn't. It only gives him minor burns. Now, back to Mike from the past. But nonetheless, what ended up happening was that Cell also debuts his ability to utilize the Kamehameha, among other techniques, using this to scare Piccolo and then grab him from behind and start to absorb his energy, absorbing it through the biomass of his left arm, which I guess Piccolo stole this scene from Vegeta and Gohan later in the arc, because Vegeta is usually the one who gets that arm broken. That's Vegeta's arm. But anyway, what ended up happening was that Piccolo was actually feigning his weakness here. He just did this so that, like a Bond villain, Cell would go in to explain literally everything about him, explain that he was made up of the cells of all the greatest fighters, where Vegeta, Goku, possibly Gohan, Piccolo himself, King Cold, Frieza, and then some other beings they talk about in the Android AVCs or breakdown of all of Dr. Gero's androids. So Cell is, at this point, his powers when it comes to certain techniques aren't as refined as those who were on Namek or, what ended up occurring shortly thereafter during all the training, because the machine, the computer and the spy bots, one of which Piccolo blows up right here, were under the impression that they were already at their peaks of power in a sense, or at least in development beyond power level in the Saiyan saga, which is why he says, oh, that Kamehameha, which wasn't much to speak of. So at this point, Piccolo is actually still well above the power of Cell, even after he absorbed some of Piccolo's biomass, and he decides to retreat, especially when the other warriors like Trunks show up. So as a result, we could see that Cell here isn't really as powerful as Piccolo, and definitely not as powerful as 16, until he shows back up at the very end of this fight where we see Piccolo and 17 fighting. And this is actually one of the easiest fights to scale in the series overall in terms of 16 versus Cell here, because of the fact that we know exactly how powerful Piccolo and 17 are. It's stated that Piccolo and 17 are basically equal in power. You can argue Piccolo is probably potentially a little bit more powerful because of the fact that he can utilize attacks that put out way more energy than 17. Like, for example, when he uses the Hell Zone grenade against him, and then later on, the light grenade, which I'll get into momentarily. But when we see Cell shows up, he's actually well above the powers of both 17, 18, and of course, Piccolo. However, interestingly, just like 16, Cell doesn't know who 16 is. 16 knows who he is. He doesn't know who Cell is. But Cell doesn't know who Android 16 is. That's why he's saying 17, number 18, who the heck is that? And he says that right here. So he just, he's an old model, I can ignore him safely. No, you can't. Then we see Cell power up to full, and we see just how shocked Piccolo is. But the entire time, 16 is observing him seriously, because he knows exactly how powerful this guy is because of just how attuned his scouters are. And then he sees Cell power up. Piccolo is utterly stunned. Cell just walks right past him, and, he just is shaking with fear. He knows that there's nothing he can even do because of how much Cell absorbed at this point, to where he's able to easily be able to get the advantage of Android 17. And then when Piccolo goes to fight him too, what ends up happening? Well, before that, 16 is telling 17 to run away because he knows just how powerful everyone is relative to one another. But Piccolo does his best to try and fight here, but he's like utterly wrecked. Cell punches him right into the ground, kicks him into the sky, and here's when Piccolo uses his final attack. 16 at this point knows that Piccolo won't be able to do anything though, because he could tell the output of Piccolo most likely. But what we see here, Piccolo goes to use the light grenade. 17 knows that he's probably not going to be able to survive that even with his barrier and jumps out of the way, but This attack does nothing to Cell. As you could see right here, 16 confirms it. 18 says, he did it. No, he didn't. It's not even hurt. So one thing to keep in mind is that 16 said when he approached Cell and, goes to fight him, that if I've calculated correctly, my power is equal to Cell's, which means that 16 could have just stood right in the way of the blast, just like Cell did, and it would have taken 0 damage whatsoever, just like Imperfect Cell did here. So we see that if Imperfect Cell can easily manhandle 17 and punch Piccolo so hard it breaks his neck and blast him through and discard him, despite the fact that he's way more powerful than the regular Super Saiyans at this point of Vegeta before the Time Chamber and Goku right here, then that means 16 would be able to do all of this too. And despite the fact that 16 didn't want to go and fight anyone other than Goku, he goes to fight Cell. Although ironically, 16 actually is still kind of fighting Goku, because after all, Cell does have the cells of Goku. Mind's blown again. And that's when this fight finally happens, where 16 goes in to fight against Cell. And here's where we get this breakdown of what occurred and get an idea of what might have been able to occur going forward. 16 is going in to interrupt Cell from absorbing 17, taps him on the shoulder, and he just smiles and punches him right in the face, which is kind of a funny scene when you think about it. Like, maybe 16 should have been more of a rush, because who knows how long 17 could have held out, but he's like, hey buddy, bam, punches him right there, and the fight proceeds. Cell really isn't going full power at this point quite just yet, because he doesn't really see the purpose of doing so. He doesn't realize how strong 16 is. And, he's like, oh, I'm just going to take care of this guy. He probably just caught me off guard. 17 doesn't realize how strong 16 is, but just like before, to reiterate once again, he knows how strong he is compared to Cell according to his calculations, and he thinks he's superior. And they go in and they do this headbutt or really shoulder block where they're pushing against one another. Cell gets in a shot against 17 or 16, and then he stabs him right in the throat, his neck, his jugular, if he had one, with the tail, and goes to absorb him, but he can't because 16 is totally mechanical. Well, aside from perhaps his flesh, which I'll get into kind of in a moment, as we see the fight continues on, 16 grabs that tail of Cell and he slams him down and rips the tail right off by stomping on his hind quarters and then ripping that tail from it, because he thinks that this will prevent Cell from being able to absorb the others. However, Cell says, you forget, I have Piccolo cells in me. I don't think 16 forgot that, so he just has no idea because he doesn't even know who you are. He just saw some weird bug guy show up who's stronger than his friends, and he wants to stop him. And Cell demonstrates this right now by regenerating. Cell says this is an easy amount of flesh to regenerate, so that means it likely didn't use up that much of his energy or stamina in order to regenerate this particular section of his body. However, stamina still is something that's expended, as we saw on Namek with Nail when his power level went down when he regenerated an arm. So it is likely that over time, if 16 continued to do significant damage to Cell's body and force him to regenerate, he still would end up using more and more stamina. And 16 says right here, then the only way to stop you is to kill you. And Cell says, and you'll never do, and that you'll never do. Which is a question of, does 16 have the abilities to do this? Well, at this point, Cell didn't see 16's more powerful attacks on display. As he says, I won't know until I try, will I? This is when Cell drapes himself in his key aura or barrier, which, usually is an indicator that someone has powered up. 16 goes to high jump kick him. Cell jumps out of the way and kicks 16 away. Then he proceeds to fly up on him and punch him. It seems like at this point, Cell is gaining a little bit of the advantage here. So it is possible that maybe this kind of all-out Cell has a higher base power level than 16, until of course we do see 16 gets the advantage again using this rocket fist that he hits Cell right with here. And funny enough, Toriyama says the gloves are off, more like the hands are off. But like I said before, we see 16 is actually kind of bleeding from the mouth, so it is possible that 16 is very much like Arnold or the T101, the T800 Model 101 from Cyberdyne Systems. Come on, Mike. And the fact of the matter is that he has living tissue over a metal endoskeleton, which is entirely possible because I don't know what else that would be. Hydraulic fluid. Even the androids in the Alien universe have white blood, but it looks like it's more red. 16 is able to easily run up there, grab it, reconnect his hand, and then he gets to work again, hitting Cell down into the ground, picking him up, and slamming him right through the ground before doing what now? He removes both of his arms, his at the wrist and the forearm, and reveals that he actually has these cannons underneath them, and proceeds to use his Inferno Blast, as they call it in this translation, and fire it underneath the ground. Somehow, despite this being an attack that he fires directly at the planet, it doesn't blow it up, despite this being way more power than likely Frieza or any of those other characters who could destroy a planet put out. But again, it's, probably because intention. And nonetheless, what he does is he attacks Cell. And what do we see right here? 16 is really that powerful, says 17 shocked. And, 16 right here is yelling at 17 and 18. He says, I thought I told you to run, 18. We won't have to now. You beat it. No, I haven't. It's been hurt, but it won't die that easily. And this is where the fight comes to an end, where 17, like an idiot Dragon Ball character, is bragging, only to have the main villain sneak up behind him and absorb him, becoming semi-perfect Cell right here. A power way above that of Android 16, where he's able to easily outspeed him, and then despite the fact that he's completely caught off guard in the middle of a sentence, 16 punches him right in the face, and it does nothing to Cell, who then proceeds to easily put 16 down by blasting off half of his face. So, going back into the fight before this ending, before this interruption of sorts, who was going to win here? Let's say that 17, 18 were not around. Let's say that Cell did not have the ability to escape. Who was going to win? Well, I think that it comes down to a number of different things here. Number one, could 16 really deal enough damage to Cell in order to kill him, as he says right here? The only way to stop you is to kill you. And Cell says, and that you'll never do. Overall, it's very clear that 16 is able to harm Cell through physical damage in terms of punching him, kicking him, ripping off different sections of his body. And according to 16, even when Cell powered up even more seemingly right here, 16 was still able to take him off guard with his attack, get the advantage once more, and deal damage to him not only through physical force again, but also through his Inferno Blast, which is able to deal damage of some sort that we don't really see. Maybe Cell regenerated it when he is underground. So, with that being said, Cell, the damage that he dealt to 16 was rather surface level. As we see the damage that he deals when he punches 16, when he goes 100+% here, maybe he was going beyond his limits, maybe he was using the Kaioken, I doubt it though. But he ends up dealing some surface level damage, blooding his face a little bit. And, 16's a robot. He could blast all of his skin off and all his blood and everything like that too, and it wouldn't actually kill 16, right? So, as a result, it looks like 16 definitely had the advantage here. Now, a major factor then in this case would be, let's say that it comes down to a battle of attrition. Let's say that these two are fighting for hours because of the fact that they're very similar in terms of their overall power. Well, this comes down ultimately to stamina, as I said before. And, the question of, does 16 have infinite stamina? Now, going back to what ended up happening before, when they're going to wake up Android 16, Android 18 is looking at the panels, and all this information here that she sees on this pod is saying that Android 16 is an infinite energy model like them, isn't it? But she says it as a question. So either she's reading something like in this black little panel right here that maybe lists 16's name and information and stuff like that, like his breakdown schematics, and says he's an infinite android, or maybe she can tell just by looking at him that he might be, or she doesn't really know and she's guessing, because like 17 later on, she goes on to find out that 16 is a totally different type of android from her in terms of being a completely mechanical, fully constructed model as opposed to being a human-based one, and thus as a result, there's a chance he might not have infinite energy. Dr. Giro doesn't say here that he does. Now, if I remember correctly, there might be guides that say it. The Android ABCs, there's a chance it might have mentioned that he's infinite energy, but nowhere here does Dr. Giro say, yes, he has the exact same energy reactor as you, however, he is still a gigantic threat, and so on and so forth. So that's a little bit up in the air, I guess you could say, leaning in the direction of him having it. Which means that, let's say 16 definitely does have infinite energy, well then as a result, he's going to be able to get the advantage in stamina over 20 because, or over Cell. I guess you could say that he would be technically 21 before, the one from the video games. But nonetheless, he would be able to get the advantage in stamina because Cell's stamina is not infinite like the other androids. Even when he absorbs them, he doesn't get infinite energy. So as a result, he would only be expending more and more energy against 16, while his power level would be slowly declining over time as 16's would always stay the same. The only way that he might be able to weaken 16 is by also doing what 16 would be trying to do and ripping off or damaging 16's limbs or preventing him from using certain attacks. However, there is a chance that 16 can't put out as much power into certain attacks, like, amping up his power through an attack like a Kamehameha or something like that imperfect Cell is capable of doing. We did see that imperfect Cell's Kamehameha wasn't much to speak of according to Piccolo when he battled him, so it's a chance that he might not be able to put out as much energy into it as he's able to do as he develops as perfect Cell later on. But nonetheless, there is a chance that, as we saw with Goku and Piccolo, and then eventually Vegeta using the Gallic Gun, their Cell's power level would go above the basic level that 16 and him would be at typically, and thus in turn might be able to deal some more damage with his big, heavy attacks than Android 16 can. Nonetheless, 16 is going to be dealing more damage overall to Cell, which Cell will regenerate, but every single time, even if it's a very tiny amount of stamina, he's only going to lose more and more and more, which makes me feel like if this really is going to come down to a battle of attrition, if this is really going to come down to wearing each other down, Android 16 absolutely would have to win this. The only way that Cell would not be able to, or would be able to come out on top, is if maybe he was able to catch 16 off guard with one of his different abilities. Maybe he was able to deal damage to him in a very vital place that he could figure out during the course of the fight to, put a stop to 16, fire a Frieza beam through one of his very vital components that stops him in his tracks, his power source or something like that. And again, maybe if 16 doesn't, for whatever reason, have infinite energy, maybe his energy would run out eventually. But again, zero indication at any point that that was ever a problem for 16. Now, another thing I do want to bring up is another feat of power that 16 displays that could give him another significant edge here in terms of physical strength, which is when Perfect Cell is fighting against Gohan, 16 is able to jump up behind him, grab and hold Cell in place and keep him there up until the point when he's going to detonate himself. Now, this bomb might have been able to kill Cell just based upon the dialogue here, although I feel like that is very doubtful. But nonetheless, because 16 seems to believe that he would be able to wipe out Perfect Cell with this attack, and all the other Z fighters, even though they're vastly more powerful than Perfect and Semi-Perfect Cell in the case of Goku, Gohan, Vegeta, Trunks, and Piccolo at this point after the time chamber. The fact of the matter is that if he were to use this against regular imperfect Cell in the first form, there's no doubt that he would be able to win, even though it would be, I guess, a draw in that case because they both take each other out. Probably the whole planet in the process too, which would be really bad. But if he could grab Cell like this and hold him in place, that automatically shows that Semi-Perfect Cell or even Imperfect Cell wouldn't stand any chance in terms of like a physical force battle, maybe because of how Dr. Giro designed 16. Now, of course, a lot of people would say, well, Cell was caught off guard and he was just distracted by everything that 16 was saying. But again, if Cell really was able to just effortlessly break free without blasting 16 like he does right here, then wouldn't he have, I don't know, probably done that immediately or judo flipped him or something like that the second he grabbed him? You know, that's a question in and of itself. So I definitely think this is worth including, because if he can grab Imperfect Cell, then he might be able to just end the fight right then and there. So in a fight between Android 16 and Imperfect Cell, who would emerge the victor? I would have to say, based upon all of the evidence, that Android 16 would be able to win this one. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below. Also, don't forget to like this video, share it out if you like it, and also stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Super Saiyan 2 Gohan from the Buu Saga versus Super Perfect Cell. Who would win in this what-if fight and come out victorious between the two? Well, in this video, I'm going to break that down in depth, using the original manga that was created by Akira Toriyama and showing the evidence in terms of the power of these two fighters on display, how they performed in the past, and how they would theoretically perform against each other. So let's get into that right now. So the best evidence that we're going to be looking at in terms of the power of both Cell and Gohan comes from what we saw of them on display in the Cell games, and then of course the early Buu Saga. So let's start with the Cell games, where we're going to be taking a look at just how powerful Perfect Cell was before he even became super perfect, so you get an idea of just how strong he became after that Zenkai boost. He started off by fighting against Full Power Super Saiyan, or Grade 4 Super Saiyan, the Mastered Super Saiyan, say that 3 times fast, all 3 of those back to back, of Goku. And the two of them, well, they started out right away where they were going and fighting one another and putting on a really spectacular display. However, nobody realized at first just how much both these fighters were holding back, and that this was just a little bit of a sparring match in order to warm each other up. Now, the main event really began, or at least what people thought was the main event at the time. That's when Goku went full power, and then Cell powered up in order to match him. Because the thing is that Cell, even though he was shocking everyone around him just like Goku did, wasn't really that close to his full power here. And yet, despite that, look at exactly what happened during this fight, in which we're able to see Cell on display in terms of not only using a variety of different techniques, especially in the anime version where he uses the multi-form, special beam cannon, destructo disc, or Frieza's variation of it, and so on. And he fires at first a Kamehameha that could have potentially just killed Goku right here and now, along with destroying the entire Earth. But Goku was able to teleport out of the way, and the two of them really got into their fight as it went on from here, where, as you could see, Cell took the advantage between the two of them, where, when he started to really ramp up his power and show Goku some of his real speed, he started to easily kind of dominate Goku here, getting the majority of the offense in here, but at this point, he wanted to put a stop to these kind of silly rules that he created, because he didn't want the fight to end in out of bounds. So he destroyed the ring, and the two of them really got into their death match all right here. As you can see here, Cell was blasting at Goku, sending him flying away, until Goku flew up in the air and began to charge up his Kamehameha at full power. Which at first people thought, you know, Goku's going to blow up the entire planet because of the fact that he has everything in his sights. I actually talked about recently a video you could see in the top right corner about how planet busting works in Dragon Ball, where I go in depth with that subject, including the scene and kind of the ramifications of what would have happened here. But nonetheless, Goku actually used his Warp Kamehameha here, teleporting in front of Cell and firing a full power blast. As you could see right here, first, not only do we get the goofy faces that Toriyama always loves to show when a villain's about to get killed or at least really hurt, but Cell is left with most of the top half of his body destroyed, with his arms, his head, everything like that. However, despite this simply isn't enough to kill Cell, because he has one of the most broken forms of regeneration in the entire franchise, where he can jump up like a monster and just completely regenerate this whole section of his body and still keep going. This might have used up some of his energy for sure, as Goku says right here, but you spent a lot of your chi now. And also, with that being said, Cell still wasn't anywhere near his maximum power, so it wouldn't have really even mattered, because if he did go full power, he would have probably just one-shot Goku, considering just how much of a strength disparity there really was, which I'll go on to show soon. At this point, Goku, he had his back pushed against the wall, and he activated Vegeta's technique, which led to, Cell activating another ability that he inherited from Android 17, which is this force field. So, I actually talked about this too in another video you could see in the top right about what effect the androids had on Cell, not just in terms of techniques like you could see here, but additionally in terms of the psychological effect that they had on him. But it was clear at this point that Goku couldn't win. He admitted this as well, because what do we see right here? He actually quits. He gives up on the fight because he knows just how powerful Cell is, but also because all of this ties directly into his strategy, which is that he purposely fought Cell so that he would be able to not only push himself and see just how well he did against the villain, but more importantly, so that he would be able to show Gohan how Cell fights for the time of their fight. And speaking of what ended up happening next in their fight, we end up leading into that right now, in which we see that at this point, Goku gives a statement about just how powerful Gohan was as a Super Saiyan here. Of course, this is Gohan when he was stronger, potentially, I'll get into that soon, than Gohan from the Buu Saga. Maybe, maybe not. And he gets into right here saying, Piccolo, Gohan has more power than I can believe. Think about it. He's been fighting with us ever since he was little, and that his power began to awaken within the Room of Spirit and Time. And this is where the point where he actually finds out or reveals to everyone that Gohan was already stronger than Goku as a Super Saiyan right here than the Goku we just saw fighting Cell. Because he thought the whole time that he was weaker than Goku and that Goku wasn't fighting for real. Goku, of course, says, I don't know about Cell, but I was doing my best. So to you, it looked like I wasn't really trying, huh? Which means that Gohan was significantly above Goku, at least to the point where he just assumed that Goku wasn't even going all out because of the fact that he thought Goku was stronger because he was comparing him to his own internal power, to the shock of everyone around him, especially Vegeta. Cell doesn't necessarily buy all this at first, but then when Gohan shows up and he powers up, what do we see right here? Well, after Goku gives Cell a senzu bean to let him go back to full power, which I discussed isn't actually a bad thing in this video you could see in the top right, yet another cheap plug. But at this point, Gohan powers up to his own full power and shocks everyone around him. Just look at Cell's face, for example. This is Cell that just saw Gohan fighting, or Goku fighting, firsthand, and yet he's shocked at the power of Gohan. Everyone is. Vegeta, Torankusu, Kuriti, Yamcha, Piccolo, 16, except for Goku. And look at everyone and their thoughts here. How did Gohan get so powerful? Vegeta can't believe his eyes. That's mild-mannered Gohan. And then Cell even basically backs this up. Perhaps what Son Goku said wasn't just a bluff after all. But it's still a joke to think that he can defeat me. Yeah, you're gonna think differently soon. I'll kill him before he can land a blow. Weep, Son Goku, weep when your son dies because of your arrogance. What an awesome villain. I also talked about that in another video in the top right where he's the best villain in Dragon Ball. And when the fight actually happened, Gohan actually didn't do too bad here, where Cell actually decided to put more effort into fighting him than he did against Goku in terms of increasing his speed and power, which he says during the course of the fight. And he's trying to actually elicit an amount of anger within Gohan so that he can tap into his true power, which we go on to see later on. Now, Gohan doesn't spend much of the fight actually fighting back because he doesn't really want to hurt Cell or kill him because that's how his character is compared to Goku. However, he still is able to get a little bit angry and kick Cell down and deal a little bit of damage where you could see that he has a bloodied lip, the exact same side of his lip as Gohan. Again, more of those time echoes that Toriyama loves to get into. You guys could check that out on my video. I don't know how many cards I'm going to be able to use in this one. So nonetheless, what ended up happening, Gohan was dodging all these attacks just as a Super Saiyan. However, he would go on to get even more powerful because even though Cell was wrecking Gohan at this point, what would end up happening? Well, Gohan would eventually become a Super Saiyan 2 after Android 16's head was crushed. At this point, Gohan totally flipped the script and flipped everything around in terms of the power dynamic. Where in this awesome form, what did he do? He went on to obliterate the Cell Juniors in very graphic fashion, as you could see here, in a way that none of the other Z fighters who were going full power at the time, except for the weakened Goku, were capable of defeating even one of these guys overall. And yet Gohan effortlessly annihilated each of them, just with swift kicks, punches, and everything like that. And what ends up happening at this point, Cell goes to power up to his full power in his perfect form. And at this point, he's shocking everyone. It's clear just how much vastly above his prior state he really was. And everyone was already sensing Gohan. So to be surprised here shows that, Cell definitely wasn't, anywhere, close to his full power before, at least that we could see. Even Goku is, taken aback by this, and he had just fought the guy. But Gohan isn't, because his power still is vastly above Cell's, which he proves when Cell can't even hurt him with a punch, and then Gohan goes on to just utterly annihilate him during their fight, wrecking him mercilessly, and eventually pushing him to the point where he self-destructs and comes back even more powerful. Again, kind of changing things up, where he returns as Super Perfect Cell, killing Trunks, and then in turn explaining in depth why this happened, where he explains that there's a small cluster of cells in his head that makes up his core. If that cluster isn't destroyed, my body can go on regenerating, even if only microscopic pieces remain. When I self-destructed, my core was unharmed. And then he comes back in really gross fashion. I hadn't really counted on regenerating. I was lucky. Even better, now I'm complete without 18, and I've powered up like Son Gohan. It must have been my Saiyan cells, a boost in power after a brush with death. I've learned to teleport like Son Goku, so I've come back even more perfect than ever. Son Goku didn't defeat me after all. He just made me better. So it's clear that Cell got a big power up here in terms of everything with that Zenkai and the ability to teleport, which adds to his even more exhaustive reservoir of different abilities that he has that he inherited from all the other Z fighters. Regeneration, the ability to potentially use all of Goku's techniques like the Kaioken, possibly the Spirit Bomb, Kamehameha, Piccolo's regeneration, Frieza's ability to survive in space and other environments, and, the list really goes on in terms of the abilities that not only that he inherited, but also perfected as he evolved into his complete or perfect form. However, despite all this, Gohan goes and powers up one more time when Cell appears, going to his full power, and Gohan actually starts to laugh. Cell is surprised here. He's like, what's so funny? Have you gone insane? And Gohan actually is confident that despite this power-up, he could still defeat Cell. He says that his dad died because he was arrogant. I'm glad I can avenge his death. I just wish I'd killed you earlier. And Cell says that things won't work out as well for him this time. So the question is, that we get a lot during this point in the fight is, did Gohan ever really go all out against Cell, like at any point during this fight and maybe even afterward? Because the fact that, I got the impression at least that because Gohan wasn't really trying when he was beating down Cell, that he must not have really been punching him as hard as he could, kicking him as hard as he could, blasting him as powerfully as he could. He was just kind of skimming off the top. So this means that Gohan could have been even more times more powerful than Cell at this point than what he was already putting out. Which means that when Cell returned with the Zenkai here, he powered up to the level of Gohan that he had already been feeling and sensing at the time, as I explained in the top right corner, where I discussed how Zenkai boosts work in Dragon Ball Z. I think I just ran out of cards, guys, so you'll have to check out my channel for the other videos I reference at this point. I'm going to do it. Which means that Gohan realistically would have still been a good amount more powerful than even Super Perfect Cell here, which might be proven as we'll go on into this fight. However, at this point, things kind of get, derailed as Vegeta interferes in the fight, goes on to attack Cell in his rage after his son was killed in front of his eyes. Cell even has to brace a little little bit here, which also might show just, the level of power that not only Vegeta's exerting, but also level of power that Cell has at this point, because he's not exactly tanking this, like Broly when he got blasted with the Kamehameha 2 millimeters away from his face, But at this point, what ended up happening was that Vegeta got effortlessly slapped away like a pimp named Slickback, knocking him right down to the ground, and Gohan flew in to stop this piercing attack that was meant to defeat Vegeta. Now, this is Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2. He flies in the way, not really able to deflect this attack, and what ends up happening, well, he is injured as a result to where his arm is broken here, where it's bloodied, where it's dripping, and it's also, broken. So the question is here, in terms of this, especially with what we see with Gohan say right here, and Cell says, enough fooling around. I've let this go on too long. And then Gohan says, Cell's powers increased more than I thought. So a lot of people have interpreted this scene as actually saying that Cell was more powerful than Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2. That enough fooling around means that he wasn't really trying when he went to kill Vegeta, whereas when that means that if Gohan went in here and tried to, save Vegeta and didn't make it in time, even though he was a Super Saiyan 2 flying perhaps at top speed, then this would theoretically mean that Gohan was not, as powerful as Cell, and that Cell could have been significantly above him. I don't really tend to go with that kind of viewpoint. I think it's just that Cell blasted before Gohan even ran away, Cell was closer, and that Gohan wasn't trying to protect himself at all. So even though he is more powerful potentially than Cell here, most likely, this still means that he would have been able to be injured in this case. Additionally, when Cell goes to power up his Kamehameha, which he states would be able to destroy the entire solar system, what ends up happening is that Gohan hears from Goku, who tells him to fire up a Kamehameha just like Cell, and he believes he can win. Goku knows Gohan's full potential even more than Gohan does, and additionally, he also is sensing everything happening at the time, which is why he even knows that this Kamehameha clash is happening, because he's using King Kai and his top-tier sensing abilities to do that. Now, Gohan says right here, but what good would it do now? I can only use one arm, and I've lost half my chi, or ki as they pronounce it in Japanese. Goku still says, you can do it, believe in yourself, one last time, show me the power we made together. So again, is this actually accurate here? Did Gohan really lose half of his power when he was hit with that blast and his arm was crippled? Or is this something that's more of a mental block inside of Gohan, that because the fact that he was demotivated, as we could see right here, not even wanting to put up a fight against Cell, this in turn means that he didn't actually lose half his power, but really was only feeling like he was that level of power because the fact that he was demotivated. And of course, chi or ki also has the mental aspect, which you kind of need to have in place in order to be able to really go full power and do everything like that. I always kind of interpreted it as the latter, where Gohan, probably didn't really lose half his power, but when he starts out the fight, he's only outputting half his power up until the very end when he really unleashes everything. So even with potentially half his power right now, Gohan's able to fire up a Kamehameha, which matches up to what Cell outputs. Now, Piccolo says right here, it's no good, we can't win, Gohan's chi is too weak. He never said this before Cell attacked him. So there's a chance that Piccolo was sensing a stronger ki from Gohan during this point in the fight. Additionally, not just that, but Cell had way longer to charge up his Kamehameha. He was doing it for a while before Gohan even fired his up. So as a result, this kind of also might lend the idea that Gohan was more powerful or able to gather up chi much faster than Cell because, he was able to then match up here. Either that or an alternate theory somebody might propose is that despite the fact that Gohan is, firing at Cell here and Cell wants to win, he's doing this for fun. He's only blasting at Gohan to match him right now before everything goes on. In the anime, we see Cell kind of rev it up a number of times. In the manga, Cell is just saying that he thinks he's going to win, that he's going to overpower Gohan, and Gohan says right here that he's doing his best and he can't do anymore, but Goku corrects him saying that you're holding back trying not to destroy the planet and just let go, use your full power and the Dragon Balls can fix it. Which, they have the Namekian Dragon Balls to save everyone just in case, because chances are, if he really just went all out not caring about the planet, the Earth Dragon Balls, along with Dende, wouldn't exactly be there much longer anyway. Now, we don't really know for a fact what would have happened if Cell was going just 100% trying, assuming that he was holding back here and, he fired at full power with zero disregard for the Earth, or 100% disregard for the Earth, actually, just like Gohan was theoretically going to do, because we see that Vegeta interferes, knocking Cell a little bit off guard and also kind of distracting him. And then at this point, this is the time where Gohan really fires his full power attack. Now, if Cell was going full power, then this means that Gohan's definitely way more powerful than Cell here, because his attack instantly overpowered Cell's Kamehameha, fired, and then completely obliterated him down to nothingness. Which means that Gohan clearly was more powerful, assuming that Cell was. Like, maybe you could argue that Cell could have fired a blast equally as powerful if he had actually seen everything coming, because as you could see right here, he wasn't expecting any of this to happen, and that opening is really what allowed Gohan to win in this example. But again, this is also potentially a weakened Gohan by half, and someone who we know is weakened at least to some degree because he was injured. So in terms of that, I would say that Gohan definitely was more powerful out of the two here. Now, with that being said, in terms of like a straight up fight between the two of them, there is the question of could Cell have been able to use some of his techniques to overpower Gohan if he didn't just, if Gohan didn't get injured and the two of them basically just started with a Kamehameha clash. If Cell like decided to just fight Gohan normally with his broken arm, could he have beaten him? Additionally, if he had fought him one-on-one normally, would he been able to use his different broken techniques and, the instant transmission to get the edge? I don't know if that's the case, because Gohan might have been that much above him to where it would nullify that, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, this leads into Gohan in the Buu Saga. So I discussed in a video in the past where I discussed that Gohan the Buu Saga might not really have lost anywhere near as much power as people think. A lot of people seem to believe that Gohan at this point actually lost several times the power or something. However, as I discussed with MJXTV in my video you could see on my channel, how much power did Gohan lose between the Cell Saga and the Buu Saga, it might have been maybe 20-25% if that, because you could also make an argument that he didn't truly lose power, more that he kind of lost the ability to tap into his deep reservoirs that he gets later on with Ultimate, and also that he lost his fighting sense. Now, with that being in mind, another thing to keep in mind here is that when Gohan is going Super Saiyan 2, and even Super Saiyan, he is more powerful than Gohan was when he started the fight against Cell before he became a Super Saiyan 2. Now, the reason for that is because the fact that when Gohan was fighting Cell as a regular Super Saiyan, this is before he tapped into his hidden potential and was able to do it at will. Something that you could argue he just completely lost over time. However, there's an argument to also be made that Gohan still had about 80% of that hidden potential that he had at the time that he fought Cell, and the Super Saiyan 2 just brings him up to about that point. However, with that being said, this would still be more powerful as a Super Saiyan theoretically, and also as a Super Saiyan 2 than Gohan, would have been as a Super Saiyan when he was fighting against Cell initially during this point in the fight, even though, of course, Vegeta does go on to say right here when Gohan powers up to Super Saiyan 2, he was better back when he beat Cell. He slacked off in his training regimen. Peace isn't good for a warrior. So that's our first statement that Gohan is weaker here. As we go on to see, he is restrained by the Supreme Kai right here. And the reason why I'm showing this is because it plays into right here later on. Because later on, of course, Gohan would go on to fight Deborah. And we are given estimates of his power comparative to Cell during the section right before this, where we see that Supreme Kai is freaking out, saying that, they don't want to awaken Buu because even if he's not at full power, he'll still be able to kill them. Vegeta doubts his power because he says he doesn't think he's much to speak of, just like Deborah. And then he says that he's not as terrible as Supreme Kai thinks. We saw him outside and we could easily have handled him as long as we dodge his saliva. And then Supreme Kai asks Goku if this is true. Goku says yes, at the level we are now anyway. There was a guy named Cell 7 years ago. I guess they're about the same. So then we see Supreme Kai, going back to what I was just showing you before. Are Super Saiyans really that strong? Come to think of it, it was hard to paralyze Son Gohan when he was a Super Saiyan, and he wasn't even at full power. So when Gohan was a Super Saiyan 2 before, as we could see right here, he actually wasn't at full power. He just powered up to like the basic, lowest level of the Super Saiyan 2 that he could do, I guess, at this point, just to kind of go into it, to show off it to Kibito, because Kibito only wanted him to be a Super Saiyan. He's like, do you want me to show you my new Super Saiyan form too? So when Supreme Kai restrained him, he wasn't going full power, which means that Gohan only went full power later on when we see him go to fight against Dabura. Now again, in terms of the estimate, as we could see here, he is said by Vegeta to now be weaker than both Vegeta and Goku. This is Vegeta before he becomes Majin, is able to match up to Goku's level of power, and we know that Goku as a Super Saiyan 2 is at least more powerful than Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2 here, and likely more powerful than him as Super Saiyan 2 in the tournament. Translations vary on that, but overall it tends to lean in the being stronger than Super Saiyan 2 Gohan when he fought Cell. Nonetheless, what we see here is that, of course, we never know what may happen when he gets mad, which leads back to, something I'll get into later when it comes to the actual fight between him and Cell at this point, who would be able to win if Gohan's rage would maybe help him in terms of all of that. This leads into the fight against Dabura. And, of course, as we see, Gohan is fighting here as a Super Saiyan 2. And yes, he is a Super Saiyan 2, even though we don't see the lightning because of what I discussed in another video on my channel. Really, several videos at this point, but there's one specifically about that and about Dabura's fight against Gohan. And the two of them are kind of relatively evenly matched. Dabura is showing off what would happen if Gohan at this point were to fight someone Cell's level, or even potentially stronger, with very different techniques. He uses his flame breath, he uses the after image, he uses a magical blast right here, he even uses the spit against Gohan, which he eventually is able to get out of. And as we see right here, Goku says, "So he uses magic, huh? He's tougher than I thought." So Goku said earlier, like I showed before, that Dabura is around the same strength as Cell. And as I just showed before, Goku was sensing the power of Super Perfect Cell. And typically when they're referring to somebody, like they're referring to Frieza, like earlier when Supreme Kai said that he could kill Frieza with a single blast, or they're referring to Cell, they're usually meaning the most powerful form of that character at the time, not like a lesser form like imperfect or semi-perfect or even just regular perfect. They're referring to Cell as his most powerful. So again, they're talking about Super Perfect Cell, and Goku actually revises his statement here in terms of Dabura's power and says that he might be even more powerful, or at least stronger, depending upon the translation, or tougher than he initially expected, which means that Dabura here might be above Super Perfect Cell, and yet Gohan is basically stalemating him. Vegeta right here also says he still shouldn't have this much trouble with him. Pathetic. Gohan was stronger when he was a kid. He really has been slacking. I'm losing patience. And this is where Vegeta starts to kind of let himself purposely be seen to be evil by Dabura so that Babidi will take over his body. Now, despite Dabura being kind of caught off guard here, Gohan charges in, and Dabura is still able to kind of take advantage of this by shooting spit right at him, which if Gohan, got hit in the face or somewhere just on his skin, probably would have led to him turning into stone right now, which is why Dabura is so kind of OP here. He's basically an even more powerful version of Devilman, right? Just with Cell's level of power above that even. And he's able to throw this off. Dabura goes to use his sword and attack Gohan, but Gohan again is showing off his strength here by blocking Dabura's sword barehanded and snapping it in half. And the two of them are huffing and puffing at this point. So again, it seems like they're basically equivalent in terms of their power. This is when the fight stops, but it does go to attempt to pick up again later on when after Vegeta's become Majin and Goku's going to fight him, Goku goes to say this to Gohan when he and Supreme Kai are going to fight Babidi and Shin, or Babidi and Deborah. I guess that Supreme Kai isn't going to fight himself. But even despite that, what ends up happening? Well, they end up saying right here, get angry, Gohan. Remember the time you fought Cell and bring out all the power you have. You can't lose to anyone that way. Anyone. Right when Gohan and Supreme Kai go to fight against Deborah and Babidi, Gohan remembers what this statement is, which is that he needs to get angry, and that way he won't lose to anyone. He says this right here, that he is angry, but still he can't be the way that he was back then, which isn't really a reference to going Super Saiyan 2 or anything like that. Again, Gohan's aura and everything aside from the lightning still is showing he's a Super Saiyan 2 here. He has all the spiky aura, he has the spiky hair with the one bang, which he's always depicted as after the tournament anyway. So he definitely is a Super Saiyan 2 here. And even right here, Deborah seems to think that he can win right here, saying that of course he can because he fought him earlier and it won't be that hard for him to win. However, after this we see that Boo starts to be woken up, and what ends up happening here, Gohan gets really mad and freaks out because he wants to stop this from happening. He says if he's already at full power anyway, I might as well do something. You know, we see him raging and going up to his 100% maximum that he could put out, and he fires a Kamehameha right at Boo's shell. And as we see what happens, he's also firing it with Deborah and Babidi in his path. And what happens, Deborah doesn't even attempt to block this. Instead, he jumps out of the way as quickly as he possibly can with Babidi in his hands. Now, you can make an argument that maybe he's trying to just save Babidi and he didn't want him to be casual damage or, collateral damage, but nonetheless, Deborah doesn't even really attempt to go in there and stop him or anything like that, because maybe much like when I showed in a fight between Piccolo and 17 who would win in another fight that you guys can check out on my channel, it's possible that he jumped out of the way because he knew that he wouldn't be able to tank or stop this level of attack, which again means that Gohan was putting out even more power than before and was showing off that he actually was stronger than Deborah, who himself was stronger than Super Perfect Cell potentially, or at the very least at that level of power. Hey, here he is making a cameo in my statement. And this is even more backed up in terms of Gohan putting out more power than he did at the tournament in all these scenes, where he says to Kibito that his power surpasses all imagination and may even surpass Boo's. And then what does Kibito say? But how could that be? And Shin replies, you haven't seen what those three Saiyans can do. Again, Gohan went Super Saiyan 2 in front of Kibito, and yet Supreme Kai is saying that Gohan's power here is way more powerful than anything that Kibito showed, which means that Gohan definitely was a Super Saiyan 2 here, and also when he fought against Deborah, otherwise that statement wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. So with that being said, when it comes down to everything in terms of Gohan's power and his ability to fight, as well as Super Perfect Cell's power that I showed before, who would actually win? Well, let's get into that conclusion right now. So if Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2 in the Buu saga were to fight against Super Perfect Cell, who would win? Well, as I mentioned earlier in the video when I was going over Cell's power and feats, he definitely has a lot of techniques that he has in his reservoir of different abilities. Not just his natural abilities or bioorganic abilities with his ability to regenerate, he could blow himself up, and also at the same time, get a Zenkai boost from it, assuming he would survive every single time, even though he said he was surprised and it was an accident that he survived. And also he has all these different techniques of the other Z fighters, including the instant transmission. So that's definitely something that, along with his level of power that we saw on display against Super Saiyan 2, adolescent, teen, Cell games, Gohan, whatever you want to call him, or, whatever the video games call him in each different video game. The fact of the matter is that Gohan was, based on all the evidence, still more powerful than Super Perfect Cell during the Cell games. And when he goes to fight against Deborah, who is equivalent to Super Perfect Cell or probably even stronger based upon certain translations, this means that Gohan was stalemating him as we saw before, but then put out even more power than he was during his fight against Deborah when he attacked Boo's shell, which Deborah couldn't even deflect or fire a blast to stop, do a key clash. He just jumped the heck out of the way. We never saw that their fight came to a resolution, but much like Cell, Deborah also has a number of really powerful powerful techniques, like the magical ones I showed you, and also the spit that can one-shot anyone, probably even Cell, especially if he hits him in the face, and that corrupts his core or whatever. I mean, Cell should have died to Goku, but we all know that that was a plot hole, which I also talked about in another video that's either in the cards or on my channel. Nonetheless, I think that when it comes down to it, if we really examine who would win, I think that based upon his power, based upon his ability to tap into his rage over time, and based upon what we saw with his fight against Deborah, that Gohan probably still would be able to defeat Super Perfect Cell at this point in the series. The fact of the matter is that he can range between 2 to, 1.5 times stronger than Super Perfect Cell based upon what you look at the feats and everything like that. Maybe a little bit less, but nonetheless, I still think it would be within that margin of error we saw in the Buu saga with Gohan losing power. And additionally, on top of that, I think that, Gohan, he's shown that when he's backed into corners like this, and we've also seen with Cell's arrogance, maybe he'd want to try and bring out Gohan's power once again. If, let's assume that Cell at this point actually remembered everything that happened. He came back for a one-day visit somehow. Maybe Babbo is like, I'll have him fight in my tournament. And then he goes immediately to fight Gohan at this point before he fights Buu or even afterward or something like that. Then the fact of the matter is that I think Gohan would come out victorious. And if we do say that this is Gohan like after he fights against Buu, maybe he got a Zenkai, assuming that that was really still a thing at this point in the story, and he definitely would be able to win after his training with the Z-Sword, which I also discussed how powerful he became with that Z-Sword training on my channel as well. So I think that Gohan, obviously goes to say, or without saying, that he would stomp Cell like the bug he is as Ultimate and everything moving forward in the Buu saga after that point too. So I think that with all the evidence there being said, Gohan would prove victorious out of the two here. And that's not just because I'm a Gohan fanboy. Don't worry, I'm a Cell fanboy too. Favorite hero and favorite villain in one video. It's like Christmas, only with more explosions. But alright guys, let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Who do you think would win? Super Saiyan 2 Gohan from the Buu saga or Super Perfect Cell? Also, if you like this video, please make sure to leave a like, share out this video so other people can see it. And additionally, if you're new here, consider subscribing so you can stay up to date with all my future videos. And with that being said, make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this far into the video. I hope you're enjoying it thus far. If so, make sure to subscribe and enable all notifications, that way you can stay up to date with even more versus battles like these. Additionally, I have a channel called LaughingstockCinema, where I discuss movies and other content. I figure if you guys have watched this far, chances are you might want to hear me talk about even more stuff, and you could do it on that channel. Thank you all so much, I appreciate your viewership, and let's get into the rest of the versus battles. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing a what-if fight that I have referenced many times in other videos in the past, but never truly gave its own dedicated, in-depth video to, and so I decided, let's do that right here and now, with Super Perfect Cell versus Deborah, and who would actually be able to win if these two powerful villains went face to face in a one-on-one fight. So let's break that down in depth using the original manga, discussing the strength of each different character relative to one another. So let's begin with the villain of the prior arc in Cell. Now I've discussed in depth Cell's power in a number of videos in the past, including a video you could see in the top right corner where I discussed who would actually win between Super Perfect Cell and Gohan, the very one who fought Deborah in the Buu saga, which you could check out in the cards up there. That's gonna be the first of many plugs because you guys know I've done so many videos about Cell at this point that I could basically fill an entire library of Alexandria full of them if you turn them into VHSs or maybe book forms. But nonetheless, let's keep going because the thing is, at this point, Cell, his power was significantly greater than regular Super Saiyan Gohan or, regular Super Saiyan Goku after both of them had mastered their power, came out of the time chamber, and Gohan was actually the stronger out of the two. As I discussed in yet another video in the top right corner, wow, I'm already getting those in pretty quick here, aren't I? Where I discussed how Gohan was actually stronger than Goku before he even became a Super Saiyan 2. Nonetheless, Cell decided to rev his power up so that he could show Gohan his true terrible power, as he says right here. He goes to power up, and as you could see, the reaction to everyone here is utterly shocked. And this is after they had been sensing the power of Super Saiyan 2 Gohan on display. However, Gohan, he's not rocked at all, despite these little rocks, kind of floating in his face. And we even see Gohan momentarily, but we see Goku first saying, "This is Cell's full power at last." You could see that he's shocked about the terrible power that Cell is displaying right here, and even Krillin's talk about how he could feel the entire planet rumbling. However, Gohan, well, he's not exactly impressed. Whoopee, as he says in this version. Cell thinks that he's being arrogant. He doesn't really understand just how much of a outmatched opponent he really is here. He goes to punch Gohan right in the face, and it does nothing to him. Gohan returns fire and easily wrecks Cell with this punch, hits him twice, and Cell is stumbling, and he could barely even stand up, and he's saying right here, "Impossible, I couldn't have been hurt by just a couple of punches." And Gohan only continues to beat Cell's face in, and beat his stomach in, and every other part of his body that he can get his hands on throughout the course of this fight, up until he knocks him back down to semi-perfect Cell by removing 18 with him via a punchectomy directly to his head, with the kick, actually, in this case in the manga, or, in the anime, I believe he throws in an additional punch that kind of lends to that situation. At this point, Cell, well, he doesn't exactly want to be a, guy who's going to bow out gracefully here. So he decides to blow himself up because he is a Dragon Ball Z villain after all. At this point, Goku, bravely sacrifices himself, teleports him to King Kai's planet, and Cell blows himself up. At this point, everyone thinks that Cell is dead, but boy, were they wrong, because Cell would then return from self-destruction way more powerful than before as Super Perfect Cell. First, immediately killing Trunks, because time echoes exist, as I said in another video you can see in the top right, and we see, here he is, with the same kind of Super Saiyan 2-esque aura with the lightning surrounding him, just like Gohan. However, just because they have lightning doesn't mean that they're necessarily a Super Saiyan 2 or not, which I've discussed in other videos in the past. I don't know if I should put that in the cards, though, because I'm going to run out of them at this point. But nonetheless, what Cell goes on to explain, and this is also going to play a factor in terms of the fight with Deborah, is that he has a small cluster of cells in his head that makes up his core. If that cluster isn't destroyed, his body can go on regenerating, even if only microscopic pieces remain. When he self-destructed, his core was unharmed, as you can see right here. And then we see him growing back from that kind of microscopic core. He hadn't even counted on regenerating. He was lucky. Now remember, Cell actually went from semi-perfect levels, who was already at the very most half as strong as his perfect Cell form, really significantly less than that. And, then he got so powered up, he not only became perfect again because the energy and the information stored within his core, but additionally, he was able to power up like Son Gohan, as he says right here, because of his Saiyan cells. Which means that his power increased significantly, exponentially, to the point to where he went from semi-perfect Cell levels to being on par with at least the suppressed form of Super Saiyan 2 that Gohan was using here when he was fighting against Cell. However, at this point, we see things go in the direction of Cell being favorable because Vegeta, in his rage from seeing his son die before his eyes, rushes to attack Super Perfect Cell using Vegeta's technique, which of course always fails because it is Vegeta's technique. And we see that he gets slapped right down to the ground. Cell goes to kill him with a piercing attack, very akin to what we saw with Frieza on Namek, and Gohan jumps in the way, taking the blast without really even putting up any protection or guarding himself, aside from his general key barrier that, he's draped within, and takes that right on the arm, which in turn causes it to be broken. And so we never really get a straight up fight between Gohan and Super Perfect Cell in this sense. However, The thing is, in terms of Super Perfect Cell's power comparative to Gohan, even after Super Perfect Cell returns, Gohan is still smiling, he's still laughing, he still is confident, as you could see right here, that he would be able to defeat this power that Super Perfect Cell has. And even though shortly after this, when he takes that shot from Cell, Gohan goes on to say that Cell's power increased more than he thought, the fact of the matter is that that isn't necessarily an indication that Cell is stronger, nor is this statement about enough fooling around. I've let this go on too long, but it's more of a statement about Gohan's arrogance in this situation, because if he had just let Vegeta take that shot, because, you know, they could just wish him back with, like, you know, the Namekian Dragon Balls or something like that, the fact of the matter is that he would have been able to fight Cell one-on-one and probably would have defeated him, because everything we see after this, where Cell charges up his Kamehameha, which is explained by Cell to now be a solar system level attack. And again, this is also not said to be the maximum amount of power that Cell could put out. A lot of people seem to think that this would be every single ounce of energy he has, but when he actually goes to fight against Gohan, who charges up a Kamehameha, where he tells Goku before this that he has lost one of his arms and in turn half of his chi is gone, he is still able to, at this point, fire a continuous blast at Gohan, while Gohan himself is firing the same amount of power with his non-damaged arm. And so as a result, you can argue that maybe this level of power that Cell is putting out would have been a constant stream that would be able to destroy not just one, but many solar systems if he fired it back to back to back to back at a variety of different solar systems. There's never really any true cap we're given. However, I guess maybe you could argue, if you want to try and lowball Cell here, that he was just trying to fire a blast akin to what Gohan was putting out so that he'd be able to have a more fun exchange. However, the thing is that both them are still clearly, you know, having the aura, the power of the ki going in their direction. That's why you could see that both of them, you could see things kind of flying away from them. And additionally, you could see that their silhouettes are kind of being blurred out a little bit against the light of the energy that is coming off, not of just their blast, but also their opponents. You can even see right here, Piccolo is saying that Gohan is being overpowered. However, Goku the entire time is sensing everything. He knows that Gohan hasn't actually gone all out because he's trying to hold back in order to not destroy the planet. However, at this point, we do see that Vegeta intervenes in this combat and in turn gives Gohan the chance to fire a true full power Kamehameha, which again might only be half of the power he really could have put out if he was not hurt at this point. And what happens? Cell is obliterated by this attack. So we don't get to see, again, like I said before, Cell fight against Gohan before this in anything other than just like a one-on-one ki clash, a beam struggle as it were. However, the fact of the matter is that we do get to see his power in destructivity on display, being able to not only match a weakened Gohan here as his Super Saiyan 2, who also brought out all of his hidden potential simultaneously, but additionally to where he's able to, in his own words, before even firing this attack, destroy the solar system, which I said doesn't mean that that's all he could even destroy. So that goes to show Cell here is definitely at least solar system buster level of powers. And additionally, with the variety of different techniques he has from all of the different Z fighters, including the one that he just picked up from Goku before all of this happened, where he gained the instant transmission or the teleportation, that makes him a very versatile fighter and someone who's incredibly powerful against his opponent, Deborah, here today. But in terms of Deborah's power and his abilities, let's get into that right now as we break down this other half of the equation right here. Now, Deborah is first introduced to us near the start, really the entering somewhere near the second act of the Buu saga, after the tournament is interrupted by Spopovich and Yamu, as we could see right here in the picture, taking Gohan's energy, which is what led them all to Babidi's ship. At this point, we're given a little bit of insight into who this character is by these characters, where they say, Deborah, Babidi even has the king of the demon plane under his command? That's trouble. He's the last one we expected to see. And then he says, you don't become the king of the demons through niceness. You may be the strongest in this world, but in the realm of evil, he wins every contest. And we get a little bit more insight into Deborah's power after we see, Spopovich and Yamo again pop like balloons. And Deborah can sense the power, even though everyone here is suppressed, of the Z fighters, and immediately goes to fight them. He speed blitzes up to them right here. He gets right in Kibito's face and blasts him. And then he uses perhaps his most broken one-shot ability that he has right here of the Stone Spit, where Krillin and Piccolo, they get pretty stoned right here and now, don't they? Where Krillin, you could see, even though he got hit in the face, you could see that the Stone Spit is forming not just on his face, but also his hand, and eventually covers his entire body. Piccolo got hit in the chest, but again, we see that it covers his entire body almost instantly. The thing is that in the manga, there isn't really that much indication of just how much time is passing. It could have been a picosecond. It could have been 30 seconds while Deborah just kind of like laughed there for a very awkward amount of time. Who really knows? In the anime, it's obviously shown to us, but either way, the fact that Krillin, for example, got hit directly in the face, and we don't really see any of these particulates hitting his hand, and yet it's still going there, could prove really important when it comes to how the spit will play in the fight between Deborah and Cell. Because the fact of the matter is, if Deborah were to say spit on Cell's, foot or his wing or his thorax, anything like that, and then suddenly the spit will start to turn him into stone at various different points in his body where the spit did not hit, then that's going to prove incredibly damaging to the fight for Cell's half, and also for everyone on Cell's team, because the fact of the matter is that in Dragon Ball Multiverse, which itself is fan fiction, is we see a story where one Cell from one universe fights Deborah from another one, and Deborah spits on Cell, which then causes Cell to rip his own head off retroactively and then regrow his body. Obviously, this is fan fiction. That's something that would probably never happen. Cell would never really even think to do that, especially since he's not going to even know about the spit going into this fight. And not just that, but there's so many instances of, let's say that Cell cuts his arm off, well, maybe Deborah spits on the other one while he's doing that, Another thing is, too, that Deborah has so many openings that he could use this against Cell, because one ability for Cell I didn't mention thus far is the ability to create the Cell Juniors. I often see that used in Cell's favor. Oh, well, Cell would just be able to create Cell Juniors so that he could team up with them to fight against Deborah. Well, do you think Deborah is really going to give him a chance to do that, just to stand still and spit out people to fight, against the guy? Or do you think he's going to spit right on Cell when he's doing that, turn him into stone? There's not much he can do. So again, we don't know how fast this process works, but nonetheless, that could be a major one-shot that Deborah could use against Cell, and he could hit him, theoretically anywhere and defeat him, assuming that Cell is not forthright and intelligent enough to instantly cut his core out of his head and throw it on the ground or something and regenerate. But nonetheless, that is one of his biggest abilities. In terms of his overall power, a lot of people might wonder, well, would Deborah even be able to fight against Cell other than the spit, or is he weaker than him? Well, let's get into an estimate directly coming from Vegeta and Goku about the level of Deborah's power. Where during everything that's happening, Supreme Kai is freaking out because he doesn't want them to destroy the floor so they can go and fight everyone down there, because he doesn't want Boo to wake up. At this point, Vegeta is scoffing and he says, I'll bet this Boo isn't much to speak of either, just like Dabra or Deborah. Of course, they say Dabra in the English translation of the manga, because that is the pun of Deborah's name. It's Dabra, kind of like from abracadabra, much like pui pui is the Japanese words for pocus in hocus pocus. At this point, Supreme Kai is confused, like, Dabra, what do you mean? And then Vegeta says, I'm saying that Dabra is not as terrible as you think. We saw him outside and we could easily have handled him as long as we dodged his saliva. Kibito is just incompetent. Supreme Kai asks Goku, is this true? And then Goku responds, yeah, at the level we are now anyway. He would have been bad news before, though. There was a guy named Cell 7 years ago. I guess they're about the same. Are Super Saiyans really that strong, says Supreme Kai? Come to think of it, it was hard to paralyze Son Gohan when he was a Super Saiyan, and he wasn't even at full power? So this is, this statement right here that Supreme Kai just made is also going to play a part too, because we do see full power, seemingly Super Saiyan 2 Gohan fighting against Deborah later on, and like I said, yes, he is a Super Saiyan 2. I did a video about that as well, you could see in the top right corner during their fight. Nonetheless, the fact of the matter is that Goku here says that Deborah is comparative to Cell. And this is, of course, before Goku actually gets to see Deborah's full power on display against his son. Now, so many people over the years have tried to say in every way, shape, or form that Deborah is not comparable to Super Perfect Cell. They're like, oh, well, Goku's actually talking about the suppressed Perfect Cell that he fought because he sensed him and he saw his fighting capabilities up close. Oh, Goku must just be referring to full power Perfect Cell because he was right there when Perfect Cell went full power against Gohan and then he died before he got to sense Super Perfect Cell. Again, that's not true, because as I just showed you before, during the Kamehameha clash between Gohan and against Super Perfect Cell, Goku is using King Kai in order to sense everything that's happening here. Remember, this is something that Goku and the other characters have done in the past. Not only are they just talking, but they're also using his antenna, which are really great at sensing, to get an idea of everything that's going on. Goku isn't just kind of taking everything on faith here with Gohan. He knows just how powerful he truly is. He knows exactly what Cell is doing in terms of firing off a Kamehameha, because he's actually sensing everything that's happening on Earth, and he also knows just that Gohan is able to win in this fight. So again, Goku does not in any way not know Cell's full power. In fact, he absolutely does know Super Perfect Cell's full power because he's sensing it right here. So when he in turn is saying that, oh, he's about the same as Cell, he must be talking about him, otherwise he would have made some kind of clarifying thing. And typically, kind of like when the Supreme Kai said before that he could kill Frieza with a single blow, when a character is talking about a previous villain, they're almost always talking about the full power of that previous villain. Otherwise, this statement wouldn't mean anything, because it could just mean, I don't know, imperfect Cell, or Cell after he absorbed a bunch of people and then went to fight Piccolo and, Android 17. It could mean a million different things. So with it meaning the most simple thing, which is what Toriyama tends to write, the most simple thing of all, he's comparing him to Cell. And we know at this point, Super Perfect Cell is what he's talking about, and we know at this point that Goku and Vegeta would curb stomp Super Perfect Cell in their Super Saiyan 2 forms. Even before Majin, Vegeta would be able to defeat Super Perfect Cell because he's stronger than Gohan, who goes on to fight Deborah, who Goku compares to Super Perfect Cell. And we obviously know that Goku would be able to beat him because, as his Super Saiyan 2, he is equal to Majin Vegeta. And thus, as a result, when we go on to see Gohan fighting against Deborah, what do we really get to see here? Gohan, in his Super Saiyan 2, despite the fact that he doesn't have lightning, is doing pretty well against Deborah overall when you consider everything. Even though he got weaker from when he was a kid, even though at this point in the story, he is, not really able to channel his full hidden potential, and he's not able to up until the point where he gets unlocked by the Elder Kai, and also that he lost a lot of his fighting sense, he really isn't vastly weaker than he was when he fought against Super Perfect Cell, maybe like 20%, which I've talked about in videos in the past. And with that being said, we see that he is fighting relatively evenly with Deborah in terms of actual power. Deborah is using a variety of techniques against him. He uses this flame spit against Gohan, he uses an after image and then attacks Gohan with this magical blast right here, and Gohan keeps coming back from it, and the two of them are fighting, even though it does look like Deborah kind of has the advantage here. Now remember what I said before about Goku comparing the power of Deborah to Cell. Well, he says right here as well, so he uses magic, huh? He's tougher than I thought. Now, in different translations, Goku actually says he's a lot stronger than I thought he would be. And thus, as a result, a lot of times what we end up seeing is that, people oftentimes will say, oh, he just is tougher than Goku thought, which means that he's really just saying that Goku, in this case, is saying that Deborah only has, a lot of variability with his magic rather than him being more powerful than Super Perfect Cell because the fact that, he just has a different energy source to draw from. Instead, depending upon the translation, Goku is just flat out saying that he is a lot stronger than he thought he would be, which is to say he's a lot stronger than Cell, aka Super Perfect Cell, as we saw fighting against Gohan right here. And thus, if this really is the case, then this means that Deborah is not only more powerful than Cell, but also has a one-shot ability on his side, which is the ability to turn people into stone, which again, if he's able to, speed blitz Cell, kind of like he did here with everyone when they were on the cliffside, and then spit directly in his face, well, that means Deborah would kind of win in that case. But, let's talk about different techniques here as well, because that's could be another factor that's going to play a part, because a lot of people will say that maybe Cell would be able to defeat Deborah based upon pure technique and variability with regeneration, with his teleportation, with things like that, which you could definitely argue might be able to give Cell enough of an edge depending upon just how powerful Deborah is in terms of being above him. However, when we look at this fight between Deborah and Gohan, Deborah also has tons of abilities. Not only does he have the stone spit, the flame breath, the magical blast, but he also has magical manipulation where he could actually spawn and generate weapons like we could see right here that he uses against Gohan. And this only goes even further because the thing is that Deborah doesn't necessarily use his full power here against Gohan during this fight. We really get to see more of that on display during his fight against Majin Buu, where he goes to fight against Buu after insulting him, and Buu at first kind of catches him off guard, hitting him right in the eyes, causing them to, I guess, be destroyed in this fight because they are bleeding. However, they do come back after Buu kicks him into the ground. So Buu really did kind of take Deborah off guard here, but nonetheless, even with that in mind, Deborah still comes back, generates a spear to throw it directly through Buu, and then in turn goes on to fight him. Now, in the anime, this is a lot more drawn out, where what ends up happening is that Deborah knocks Buu back, blasts him a bunch of times, and is doing a lot better than really anyone during the fight overall. However, at this point instead, in the manga, basically Deborah goes to punch Buu, Buu immediately uses the cookie beam in this case on him, turns him into one, and eats him up. And thus, as a result, it leads to everyone being reversed in their stone spit. Now, with that being said, in the anime, like I said, if you want to include that, Deborah did put up a much better fight here, but again, Buu is kind of a character who is really hard to read. Nonetheless, in terms of Deborah's full power, it is definitely possible that at full power he was still stronger than even Gohan here. However, there is one brief instance, which I've shown in other videos in the past, that kind of seems to go against that, where Gohan goes to attack Buu's shell when Buu is being woken up. Because right before this, Gohan was actually right about to fight Deborah. At this point, Babidi asked Deborah if he would actually be able to win against Gohan in their one-on-one rematch. And Deborah says, of course, I fought him earlier. It won't be hard to dispose of this little snot. At this point, Gohan remembers Goku saying, get angry, Gohan. Remember the time you fought Cell and bring out all the power you have. You can't lose to anyone that way. Anyone. Now, Gohan at this point cannot tie into and tap into everything that he could as a kid. He could still go Super Saiyan 2. He could still push his power further than it has been before, which Supreme Kai confirms later on. However, right here, we do see that Gohan, he rages out as a Super Saiyan 2, charges up a Kamehameha, and fires it directly at Buu's shell. At this point, Deborah jumps out of the way, trying to save Babidi, but also potentially trying to save himself, because he doesn't even try and stop Gohan here. possibly because Gohan is still stronger. So if we're going to rank the power of everyone here overall based upon everything that we see in the manga, it would be Super Saiyan 2 Gohan from the Cell games at 100%, where he's not injured, just going all out, not even trying to hold back. Super Saiyan 2 Gohan with the broken arm when he fires that Kamehameha at the very end. Then this Gohan here, followed by Deborah, then followed by Super Perfect Cell. So in terms of all this, Gohan would still be stronger than both Deborah and Super Perfect Cell here when he rages out and goes full power, but nonetheless, he wouldn't be as powerful as what he was as a kid, even when he's raging out here. And obviously, if he tapped into his full hidden potential here as a Super Saiyan 2, then he'd be somewhat equivalent to his, Mystic Gohan or Ultimate Gohan at the end of this arc. So overall, I don't think that Deborah jumping out of the way is any indicator that he's somehow weaker than Cell, but rather overall it seems more like an indicator of how powerful Gohan still is at this point. So with all that being said, if Deborah were to fight against Super Perfect Cell, who would actually win here? Well, even though, as I've talked about and many people have made the argument for, Cell does have some arguments that maybe he would be able to win using his techniques, maybe being able to blow himself up again, and then in turn be able to possibly scale up to Deborah or surpass him in terms of his power. One of the little arguments against that goes in line with my active threat Zenkai theory that I talked about on my channel. You can see in the top right, where that does kind of require the Saiyans to be able to sense or feel the power of their enemy, which no one at any point seems like they really were able to do with Deborah or any of Babidi's minions because of their power reservoir. However, with that being said, maybe you could try and make that argument. However, what I've shown today shows that in terms of pure power and in terms of even technique, Deborah has Cell beaten, because he would not only be able to beat Cell in a straight up fight, but additionally, all he has to do is spit on him in the right place or multiple times. Maybe he could just hawk as many loogies as you could possibly imagine, like a old Western spittoon spitter or something like that. Or, maybe he gets punched in the jaw, Deborah opens up his mouth, and there's some spit right on Cell's fist. Even if Cell keeps ripping off the body parts, he'll lose by stamina eventually anyway, right? So overall, I think it's pretty clear that Deborah has the edge here and probably would prove victorious. But what do you guys think? Let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. If you're new here, you can subscribe and enable notifications to stay up to date with all my future videos. Make sure to leave a like, share your own thoughts as I said before, and stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing another what-if fight that would have taken place during the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z. This would have pit Super Saiyan Goku against Super Saiyan Vegeta before either of them entered the time chamber in order to surpass the Super Saiyan barrier and overcome the androids with their pure power. Who would actually win out of the two of these different characters? Well, I'm going to be breaking that down in depth using the manga, discussing the power of each character relative to one another, and how well they would actually do in a theoretical fight. So let's begin with Goku in this case and his level of power. Starting with this arc, of course, Goku had returned from Namek after becoming a Super Saiyan and defeating Goku on that planet. However, before he came back, he made a detour at planet Yardrat, in which he learned how to become a Super Saiyan at will and maybe increase his power a little bit from there. As we end up seeing, what occurred was that he went face to face against Trunks, another Super Saiyan from the future, and the two of them ended up fighting against one another in a brief sparring match. We saw that during this fight, everyone was shocked at the pure power on display here. Even Vegeta, as we could see down below, the one who's going to be fighting against Goku in this theoretical fight, is saying, so that is a Super Saiyan. So Goku had already significantly surpassed the power of Vegeta on Namek by becoming a Super Saiyan after he had already surpassed Vegeta in his base form with a Zenkai boost. However, he took it even further here by training on Yardrat and achieving the teleportation technique, the instant transmission or Shunkan Ito, which pushed him that much further above Goku. However, shortly after this, Trunks would explain in depth to Goku exactly what was going to happen, and that in 3 years, the androids would arrive and kill everyone unless they trained. This is what led into everyone going about to do that, where Piccolo would go on to train with Gohan and Goku, and Vegeta would go on to train himself, as we see right here, under increased gravity in a room that Dr. Brief created for him. In the manga, 300 times gravity, I believe, was the maximum, and in the anime, we saw him actually going up to 500 times gravity, which was 3 times or 5 times greater than what Goku had trained under on his way to Namek, which is part of the reason why Vegeta had such a large increase overall in power, as we could even see right here during this period of time in which he endured hellish training. And we even get to see on the cover art of chapter 142 of the Dragon Ball Z section of this, at least, where we see everyone training, with Goku training alongside Piccolo and Gohan as a Super Saiyan. Now, I actually went really in depth into just how powerful Goku became at this point in another video you could see in the top right corner on this channel in this video, in which I discussed, exactly why Goku didn't get multitudes of times stronger, because of the fact that he was actually training with Gohan and Piccolo, who were significantly weaker. Piccolo scaled up significantly to where he was almost Super Saiyan level. However, Goku did not increase his power many-fold by this point. Vegeta, on the other hand, did, because he was trying to not only surpass Goku, but additionally, he was also training under that incredibly high gravity, as I was just showing before, but I'll get into that very soon. Because after the 3 years of training, we get to see Goku's power on display when he transforms into a Super Saiyan against androids 20 and 19, with 20 of course being Dr. Gero, who was the initial main villain of the arc, along with android 19, before all the changes that were made. So nonetheless, what ended up happening, Goku immediately goes to charge in to fight against them. However, Piccolo observes very quickly that Goku already has something off about him, which is that the Super Saiyan form is actually causing him to be even more taxed with regard to his heart virus. The symptoms have already started to kick in, delayed from where they originally did in the original timeline and the History of Trunks timeline. However, despite this, Goku is still doing pretty well against android 19 at first, being able to stop all of his attacks, knocking him back, dealing some damage to him, but no matter what he does, android 19 is still able to keep coming back. Tien says right here that, astounding, what power, I never knew what being a Super Saiyan meant. It's as if he's in a different dimension from us. Too different. Piccolo says it may be, but Piccolo can already tell that Goku isn't really anywhere near his full power, because after all, Piccolo did train with Goku for 3 years and saw him as a Super Saiyan during these sparring sessions, as you could see right here, so he has a much better insight into Goku's level of power than anyone else does with his level of power here after those 3 years of training. Same thing with Gohan, which is why when he shows up and is observing the fight, Piccolo says, "Have you noticed too, Gohan?" "Oh yeah," says Gohan. "Son Goku is rushing the battle for some reason. He's already giving all he's got. But look how weak he is." Tien says, "Weak? Did you say weak? What are you talking about? Goku's overwhelming the android." Piccolo says, "This is nothing. His power as a Super Saiyan should be far more staggering than this." And this is what leads to Goku firing a Kamehameha at android 19 in order to try and take him out, but this was a mistake because 19 absorbs his power and only increases his power forward. Because the fact that actually this is going to play a major part in the fact that when he fights Vegeta, he's actually powered up significantly from where he was when he initially was fighting Goku. The two of them only continue to fight from here as Goku is, only taking more damage. The heart virus is doing more damage to him, as well as android 19, who had just powered up. He knocks him down, and eventually the heart virus takes its toll to the point to where Goku, even with the Sensu Bean, cannot overcome the damage that 19 is putting out. He gets knocked to the ground. 19 takes him down and starts absorbing all of his energy in his base form, which is when Vegeta eventually intervenes by kicking 19 out of the way, which leads into their fight. And before that, Vegeta even says right here, "I saw everything. You noticed the anomaly in your body, but you turned into a Super Saiyan anyway. You fool. You knew it would only put more strain on your heart." This is what leads to him going face to face against 19, ready for their fight. And as Dr. Gero says right here, you're so greedy. You've already multiplied your power by absorbing the energy of Son Goku. Well, go ahead, but I'll take the other 4. So Android 19 is now stronger than he was when he was initially fighting Goku, and yet this doesn't mean anything to Vegeta because he becomes a Super Saiyan himself. And everyone here is shocked at the power of Vegeta on display, as well as the fact that he can achieve this form. He explains here exactly how he did that, where he says, he desired nothing but to be stronger, and endured a training from hell. Then he ran into his wall, his own limits. In the rage he felt toward himself, he awoke into a Super Saiyan. He overflowed with joy. He had finally surpassed Kakarot. I could be the true Saiyan Messiah, he said. And this is the first of a number of different statements that are made with regard to Vegeta actually being more powerful at this point than Goku was as a Super Saiyan. We see him going against a stronger 19. He takes a shot head on from 19, and it does really nothing other than kind of bloody his lip. He proceeds to punch him, kick him, and deal significant damage to him, eventually allowing 19 to actually grab him so he could see first and foremost exactly what happens in terms of him absorbing his power, and then he actually rips his hands off and finally uses a technique right on him, which is a new one he's debuting right here, which is Super Vegeta's Big Bang Attack. Fires it and obliterates number 19 right here. After this fight, Dr. Gero escapes, Future Trunks shows up, and he says that they should wait for Goku to get better before they go and search out Dr. Gero, because the fact that they could be overwhelmed and defeated by the androids when he wakes them up. Of course, Vegeta talks more about his motivation here, that it's not the androids he hates the most, it's Kakarot, and that he plans to kill him at last, which could lead into their fight eventually, with Vegeta's motivation being more about wanting to kill, whereas Goku no doubt probably wouldn't want to kill Vegeta if they fought, more just to test himself and to enjoy the battle, kind of like what happened in the Saiyan saga where he wanted to spare Vegeta's life. After Vegeta shows some tough love to his son to say the least, he flies off and he says once again, forget Kakarot, I'm a Super Saiyan now too, and since I'm also a prince, I should be considerably more powerful. This is a little bit of an ambiguous statement because he says he should be considerably more powerful, but when we actually get into the fight with him and Android 18, we do get some more concrete statements. Not only does Vegeta actually do significantly better against Android 18, with both them first holding back and then eventually them actually trying a lot more at this point, but eventually Android 18, after taking some damage, eventually asks Vegeta, is Son Goku even stronger than you? At which point he says, of course not. He slipped ahead of me for a while, but now I'm back where I belong. However, at this point, Android 18 says, well, then I don't have to worry too much. They begin to fight more. Android 18 wears Vegeta down, starts to get the better of him, and eventually breaks his left arm, which is usually the left arm that gets broken on Vegeta first, but she does go on to break the next one after she proceeds to beat down Trunks and the other androids, kind of get the revenge, retroactively, I guess you could say, on the others, beating them all down too. She takes out Vegeta and puts him on the ground, eventually breaking his other arm, causing him to pass unconscious, and then in turn, the fight is over. So after this, Vegeta's healed with the Sensu Beans, and you can make an argument that perhaps he actually got a Zenkai boost from this fight. However, the thing is, at this point in the series, up until Cell comes back from self-destruction, Zenkai boosts are never really mentioned again. And you can argue that maybe the Saiyans don't really get them anymore after they achieve their Super Saiyan forms, or Toriyama kind of just did away with the concept out of universe after the Namek saga. Also, you could argue the fact that perhaps the Zenkais became so insignificant at this point that they didn't really play a part anymore. I talked in depth about how Zenkais work in a video in the top right corner, but you could also make an argument too on top of all that maybe because the fact that the Saiyans are not able to sense the androids, their bodies can't properly get Zenkais against them, which means that in turn, they're not able able to actually do anything when it comes to getting Zenkais, which could also explain why future Gohan was not able to ever power up beyond the power of the androids after all the battles he did against them, and then in turn was killed by them, and in the manga version couldn't even catch up to like 50% of Android 17. Now at this point, after he flies away, everyone is talking about the power of Vegeta on display here and saying how at this point that Trunks and everyone who was a Super Saiyan were felled by one blow against the androids and really ultimately made zero difference against them. At this point, Tien says this is the being who killed Frieza, and even he was powerless against the androids. We gotta face facts. Goku is powerful, but he's not so different from Trunks and Vegeta. We can't win, not even with Goku. So at this point, you could argue that Trunks, Goku, and Vegeta are relative to one another in terms of like a similar kind of tier to one another. No one is really vastly more powerful than the other. However, there was a prior statement, which you could see right here, after Dr. Gero fled away from Vegeta, after he had goaded him into thinking that he didn't have any more power left, and oh, maybe you should attack me, you'll definitely be able to win. Dr. Gero kind of took the reverse psychology, ran away. Vegeta actually would have lost if Dr. Gero attacked him, and thus in turn takes a senzu bean and goes after him. At this point, Piccolo says he really did lose most of his power, just to confirm that the androids drained chi from their palms. If number 20 had stood his ground, he'd have easily beaten Vegeta. It was a beautiful bluff. He truly is a great warrior. He might have surpassed even Goku. At which point everyone is surprised by what Piccolo is saying. Now, in terms of discussing the overall power of them, Tien isn't as credible here as the statement by Piccolo because, as I just showed before, Piccolo did train side by side along with Gohan against Goku as a Super Saiyan. He knew better than anyone other than Gohan the full capabilities of Super Saiyan Goku, even though despite the fact that he was training with them, he likely never went all out against them due to the fact that obviously he would probably kill both of them with ease if he did that. But nonetheless, Piccolo still has a much better insight in all of this than Tien would have. Either way, I think it's fair to say that Vegeta is more powerful based upon all the evidence here than Goku would have been as a Super Saiyan, even at 100% if the heart virus wasn't affecting him. However, he isn't vastly above him. Not too long after this, Piccolo merges with Kami and becomes the most powerful Z fighter. He goes on to fight against Imperfect Cell, and then Vegeta learns about everything that's occurring right here, where he says that the Super Saiyan is supposed to be the most powerful being in existence, and here they're outdoing us left and right. It's maddening. Don't you agree, Kakarot? And Goku did in fact agree, because even though we see here that Goku is sleeping, you know, he's basically in a coma from the heart virus, we do see that when Goku wakes up shortly, he says right here that he heard everyone talking in his dreams and has a pretty good idea of what's going on, not only with the androids, but also with Cell. And as he says right here, if Vegeta can't win, I can't either. And so he plans to conserve his strength in order to transcend the Super Saiyan, which he knows that Vegeta is going to plan how to do as well, which he also says right here shortly after everyone explains the whole Cell situation, where he says right now that he's going to top himself and transcend the Super Saiyan, and that Kakarot will do the same. So it's interesting that even though neither of them are talking to one another, they both have interpreted and anticipated exactly what the other is going to do in this situation, where both of them are going to try and surpass the Super Saiyan wall. And Goku knows exactly where to do that, which is the hyperbolic time chamber. And after grabbing Gohan, he goes to meet with Vegeta and Trunks in order to ask him to go and train with him there. Vegeta had been standing here in a kind of meditative state for the past 3 days, trying to visualize himself past the Super Saiyan barrier. And thus, as a result, Vegeta might have actually been even closer to this concept than Goku had been at this point. Nonetheless, Vegeta is the one to first achieve all this because he goes into the time chamber with Trunks before Goku does with Gohan, and then in turn achieves it in this state, whereas Goku goes in afterward and not only achieves a state beyond Super Saiyan, but then goes on to master it and achieve the grade 4, which is the ultimate perfect form of that initial Super Saiyan. But of course, before Vegeta goes in, he makes the point of saying, "Kakarot, why are you suggesting that I do this too? My eventual goal is to kill you." And Goku says, "We probably can't beat this enemy alone. I'm sure you know that too." And Vegeta says, "You might regret this later." But what exactly would happen if right before they went into the time chamber, these two fighters were to combat one another? Well, when it comes time to their power, as I just discussed before, and I broke down even more in depth in those videos I mentioned earlier, Vegeta's power has been stated and shown to be more powerful than Goku's. And if Vegeta did in fact get a Zenkai boost, it's a very strong possibility that he only separated the gap even further between he and Goku. Vegeta was more powerful than Goku this entire arc after his training in the 3-year time skip than up until the point when Goku and Gohan exited the time chamber. So in terms of pure power, he would have the advantage. Additionally, if we look at the historical record, not only of the fight before this, but also after this arc, we see that there is a slant in the favor of Vegeta, because in every single fight, Goku actually did not win. Whether it be in the fight in the Saiyan Saga, where Goku was not only at a power disadvantage to Vegeta, where Vegeta's base power was 18,000 and Goku's was 8, and Goku needed to use the Kaioken, which was literally destroying his body just to be able to match up to Vegeta with his most powerful technique at the time, as we could see right here. But additionally, not just that, in the Buu Saga, after the Majin boost, Goku and Vegeta were even, and Vegeta was still able to ultimately come out on top because he exploited a weakness in Goku, which is his being very naive and thinking that Vegeta would actually be able to team up with him at this point to fight against Buu, rather than taking advantage of him having his guard down, knocking him out, and then in turn taking the Senzu Bean for himself and wanting to fight against Buu himself. So even though a lot of people might not want to count this as a victory for Vegeta, the fact of the matter is that Vegeta, with his character, isn't exactly someone who wouldn't take an easy way out, I guess you could say, in terms of playing a mind game, creating an opening in Goku, and then in turn defeating him that way. But at the same time, for Vegeta's pure pride, he probably would want to at the very least win through his pure strength and technique instead of having to resort to this. But definitely keep this in mind when it comes down to things. So Goku and Vegeta have different techniques that would match up to one another, whether it be the Kamehameha or the Gallic Gun, Kamehameha versus the Big Bang Attack. It doesn't seem like at this point Vegeta necessarily would have had the final flash. He probably created that technique when he was inside of the time chamber, rather than having it right here when he was already fighting against Android 19, and then, you know, the very short amount of time after the time when he fought against Android 18. However, Goku does in fact have another special ability under his cap that Vegeta does not have that could also play a massive role in deciding the battle, which is something that he would later go on to use against Cell during their fight, which is that when he flew up into the air, charging up his full power Kamehameha, he went to use it against Cell. At first, everyone thought that Goku was going to destroy the Earth. However, Goku used the instant transmission and then used the warp Kamehameha, firing his full power Kamehameha right at Cell's top of half of his body, vaporizing it, and then in turn winning the fight right there. So Goku has also used this in a filler fight before when he fought against Pica in the Other World Tournament, and considering the fact that Goku learned the instant transmission on Yardrat, it's certainly possible that Goku would be able to utilize this technique against Vegeta, if not highly probable, because the fact that why wouldn't he if he was certainly at a power disadvantage, kind of like he was with Cell here. And if he really wanted to, he could have just used this ability against Vegeta. Maybe what could have happened is we could have actually seen a very similar situation to what played out here in the Saiyan Saga, where Vegeta maybe was the one standing on the ground, readying himself to fire his Gallic Gun. Goku is the one in the air who is readying himself to fire his Kamehameha. Vegeta fires his Gallic Gun from the ground up. Goku simply teleports away, out of the way of the blast, as we could see right here, just like this, then fires his Kamehameha right at Vegeta and takes him out in one shot just like that. Because the fact of the matter is, if Vegeta is caught off guard with that shot, all of his energy is being directed outward in a blast, he's not going to really be able to defend himself, right? And thus, in turn, Goku could just take him out right then and there, even if Vegeta is a little bit more powerful than him. And it's possible that the blast could even kill him. Obviously, Vegeta is a very very durable character, but so too is Cell, who is a lot more powerful than Goku, even though he was significantly holding himself back to have a fun fight against Goku. So in turn, maybe Vegeta would end up just like Cell here, where the top half of his head were to get blown off. And of course, what would end up happening is that Vegeta would not be able to jump up like a horror movie villain like this and be able to survive that. So that's definitely one way that Goku would be able to win this fight. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is a very small chance that Goku might have actually gotten a Zenkai boost from the heart virus before he went into the time chamber. However, again, this was a natural situation, so it's a very strong chance that this would not have given him a Zenkai boost. After all, what would he really even level up to, using the Zenkai theory I talked about before? And not just that, but Goku didn't exactly go into a healing chamber or take a sensu bean or something like that to heal himself. Rather, he laid in his bed, drank some medication, and then he was good to go after a little bit of rest. So I don't know if Goku really would have gotten a Zenkai from this. It doesn't seem very likely, nor does it necessarily seem the most likely that Vegeta got a Zenkai boost from his fight against Android 18, because again, it's never mentioned that he's stronger, and everyone speculates about Vegeta's power after he flies away, and basically says that, it doesn't seem like there's really anyone mentioning or taking note of the fact that he's stronger than before. So overall, in terms of who would actually win the fight between Super Saiyan Goku and Super Saiyan Vegeta before they entered the hyperbolic time chamber, it definitely is one that can seemingly go either way. On one end, Vegeta is more powerful than Goku, as I've discussed in depth in other videos and in this one, and of course has certain techniques on his side that might be able to, overpower Goku, and for him to be able to take some of Goku's hits even better than Goku would be able to take his. On the other hand, Goku does have a very OP technique, which is the Warp Kamehameha, which he could definitely use against Vegeta, because Vegeta no doubt wouldn't be able to interpret or anticipate that Goku would be using that, and in turn would be able to hit Vegeta with it and maybe secure the victory right then and there. So it could really go either way, but overall I feel like in terms of if I were to do it out of 10, I think that Vegeta would take it at least 6 times out of 10. But let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. What do you guys think? If you're new here, consider subscribing and enable notifications. You could stay tuned to all my videos to come in the future. Additionally, make sure to leave a like, share this video out, and stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing another hypothetical versus battle that would have occurred during the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z, and more specifically after the main villain was first introduced back in Ginger Town, when he was absorbing the entire city. This would be a fight between Imperfect Cell and Super Saiyan Vegeta before he went into the hyperbolic time chamber, and the question of who exactly would have actually been able to win if that hypothetical battle went down, as opposed to what occurred in the original story with Vegeta instead replacing Piccolo. So let's be getting into that right now. So let's begin with the power of the Saiyan Prince Vegeta right now. After he had achieved the Super Saiyan transformation, which is something that he was striving for since well before even Goku got it. Something that he wanted to achieve all throughout the time on Namek, and he was finally able to do so, and showed it off when he showed up in order to fight against Android 19. Now, in terms of the power of Vegeta on display, we have to do it comparatively against 19, because after the death of Frieza, there is no other power level that's indicated to us, really ever since Namek, unless you count the 5 that they scanned for Trunks and the Kili units that they use in the Buu Saga. But in terms of the power of 19, he actually was even stronger than before, as you could see right here. Dr. Gero, or Gero in the Japanese, says, "Greedy pig, you've already raised your maximum power by draining the energy of Son Goku, and yet you ask me for more, so be it. But in exchange, I alone will take the remaining 4. And so this is where we get an indication of just how powerful 19 is. Not only was he powerful enough to take a beating from a weakened Super Saiyan Goku who was suffering from the effects of the heart virus, but also he drained his energy, so he's even stronger now. This is what leads to Vegeta powering up to Super Saiyan against him, and then basically stomping him during the course of their fight. Android 19 punches him. Vegeta, in the English dub, he's like, that was for free if I remember correctly, but in this one, I suppose that's the most I could expect, you know. He's really hyped himself up at this moment. He's been waiting years for this, and he's finally going to show off how awesome he is, basically. In which he kicks him right through. This is one of the things I love in this arc, especially where Toriyama, shows characters getting hit so hard that you could actually see the imprint of the foot or the fist or whatever, they're being hit with, kind of like what we saw with Android 17 and Piccolo during their fight. Now, as we see right here too, which I even mentioned before, Vegeta did go on to stomp Android 19 and showing off just how much more powerful he was than this powered up already android, which in turn led to him actually letting himself have his energy be absorbed and using this opportunity to rip off the arms, the hands of Android 19, flying up in the air, and with the remaining energy, which, wasn't really actually that much considering what we see next, he fires his big bang attack directly at 19, blowing him up, and then after this, we see that Vegeta actually has to transform back into his base. He's so exhausted, and he even tells Android 20 this as a means of bluffing him. Android 19, or Android 20 in this case, who is Dr. Gero, doesn't take the bait, and so he actually runs away, even though, as Piccolo points out momentarily, Vegeta really did lose quite a bit of strength. He drew the fight out intentionally just so he could confirm that the artificial humans drain energy through their palms. If number 20 had called his bluff, Vegeta would have certainly lost. He acted as if it were nothing at all. He truly is a genius when it comes to the battlefield. It's possible that he's even surpassed Goku. And this is something that's mentioned a number of times during this particular early section of the arc, leading up to the fight with the androids, which is something that you could actually see me discuss more in depth in a video in the top right corner, why Super Saiyan Vegeta was actually stronger than Super Saiyan Goku during this very point. I also discussed another video you could see in the top right corner, who would have actually won between the two before they went into the hyperbolic time chamber. That's another what if fight that I've done in the past. Now eventually we see Vegeta tested, pushed to his limits, and also beaten down during his fight against Android 18. And as we could see, at first, neither one of them is actually going full power. As Vegeta says after he blasts the truck driver right here, rest in peace, I don't think he ever even got a wish back, Android 18 says, "You haven't been giving me your best." And Vegeta says, "Of course I haven't. If I were to fight you seriously, I doubt the planet could handle it." In different translations, he would easily blow away the planet if he really went all out, which is kind of the overall point that he's making. And so, Android 18 also confirms that she was holding back the whole time as well, and so she decides to go all out according to her own words, where she immediately takes the attack to Vegeta, dealing damage to him, going through his key barrier and force field and bloodying him up with that headbutt, and then the two of them begin to fight. 18 continues to have the advantage, however, Vegeta doesn't exactly go down immediately. He bounces off rocks, he jumps and headbutts her himself, double axe handles her into a mountain, blasts her, and actually in the process of doing this, he is able to damage her clothing, as you can see, going through her force field as well, and actually doing more damage overall considering what we could see the visible damage comparative to what Vegeta got, even though she isn't really drawing blood too much right now. He does say, though, that she isn't actually phased, and at this point, Android 18 is surprised by the power of Vegeta, which should really go to show that despite the fact that Android 18 is definitely the more powerful of the two here, Vegeta still is actually giving her somewhat of a fight. We don't really know what percentage of her power he is, but it really is made to be a bigger deal that Vegeta is losing stamina, as we mentioned right here. Vegeta's going to get himself killed. Take a closer look. The artificial human is gradually wearing him down. The enemy's power is seemingly infinite, but Vegeta's stamina is taking a hit with every move he makes. This is when we see 18 gets even more of the advantage. Vegeta is getting knocked back, and then eventually he can't take it anymore and gets his left arm broken, which is what leads to Trunks jumping in and everything just kind of going downhill immediately, where the androids just start to wreck everyone, including Piccolo, who I'll be getting into momentarily. And here's another example of somebody getting punched and it expanding outward. Piccolo probably doesn't have stretchy body like Stretch Armstrong or something like that. But either way, we see that Vegeta, he got wrecked and he got left laying after Android 18 broke his second arm as well, leaving him powered back down and reverting back to his normal form. So again, I think that the mention that Piccolo makes down here of the fact that the androids have infinite energy, and that's the main reason why Vegeta is going to lose because she's wearing him down, is a indicator that Vegeta is not vastly below Android 18 in terms of being many times weaker or something like that. After all, the thing is that if she was many times stronger, and that's the reason why she breaks his arm and ultimately defeats him, then as a result, that wouldn't have even been a thing worth making mention of, because Android 18 simply could have one-shot Vegeta or put him down without ever having to wear him down in the first place. And even though, according to what Android 18 says herself, that she isn't going to hold back and she's going to go all out against Vegeta, which he starts to do, Vegeta is still able to get in some shots against her and fire an attack that gets through her barrier enough to damage her clothing, even though it doesn't do any serious damage. So again, I think that means that Vegeta wasn't many times weaker or vastly weaker than her, depending upon, what you view as vast in this franchise, because some people think it's like 1 trillion times, whereas others, it's about 10%. It depends on how you actually look at the anime and manga power scaling. But either way, it's pretty clear that Vegeta, despite being the most powerful fighter here at the time that isn't evil, or at least super evil, or at least antagonistically evil at this point in time, I suppose, until afterward when he plans to kill Goku and then he would be a villain again. He still isn't at the level of androids 18 or 17. However, a character that does become at the level is Piccolo. And this is after he goes and merges with Kami and becomes, once again, the nameless Namekian, which is what leads to him, in turn, going on to fight Cell, as we see the introduction of the second fighter in this battle. And this is where we get Imperfect Cell's initial power, or at least the power after he absorbs everyone within Ginger Town, because we never truly get to see just how powerful Cell is when he is not after absorbing a bunch of people. Even when he attacks Trunks in the future, this is still after he'd absorbed people for years in the wastelands of the future before he showed up to kill Trunks when he was going to go back in time to warn everyone, even though it did say that he would have actually gone back in time a year before he initially did, which would have created an entirely new timeline and then in turn, ruined everything. So I don't know what the heck he was thinking. The fact of the matter is, we get to see what both Piccolo and Cell are capable of after Cell powers up during the midst of their conversation, and so too does Piccolo, which is where Piccolo actually tells Cell that he done goofed, because he says, the fact that you dealt with all the residents in this town works out quite nicely in my favor. This way, I'm free to go all out. So Piccolo doesn't really have to worry about collateral damage and proceeds to blast Cell pretty close to his face. I would say right in the face, but at least 1 meter or 2 away from him for my metric system fans out there. And at this point, we're told by Android 16 that one of them has enough power to rival Android 17 and 18. Of course, that is going to be a reference to Piccolo, because we do see him go on to fight against Android 17 later on in the arc, and one of the best fights in the entire franchise. However, the fact that he is saying that only one of them has the power to rival these two should showcase that Cell at this point is weaker than the androids, which only makes sense because he does go on to absorb even more people after escaping at the end of this fight. But either way, what occurs is that Piccolo at first seems to have the advantage over Cell up until what ends up happening, which is that Cell surprises Piccolo by using the Kamehameha against him, which in turn Piccolo jumps out of the way of. Cell jumps out from behind him in the midst of the smoke and the mushroom cloud that he caused, and then what happens? Well, Cell absorbs Piccolo's left arm. Always a left arm, isn't it, Toriyama? Which is actually something that we go to find out is all a ploy on Piccolo's behalf, because of course, despite despite the fact that Cell seems to have either forgotten or just, didn't realize that this version of Piccolo could regenerate, he is able to and does it right here. However, when the ploy actually began here is kind of up in the air. Ironically, as you can see, they are actually up in the air. Did it begin before he allowed Cell to grab him and then go to absorb him? Or did it only begin after he escaped and got back down on the ground and then started to feign that he no longer had the ability to maintain his balance, which makes quick movements more difficult, and by admitting this, looks like Cell is won. I feel like that's probably where Piccolo started to kind of improvise here, because despite the fact that Piccolo did have his arm absorbed by Cell, which in turn probably would have caused some kind of weakening of his overall energy, because it's the bioextract and energy that Cell is in turn absorbing from him. We can even see him huffing and puffing a little bit right here. The fact of the matter is that Cell seems to have genuinely caught Piccolo off guard right here, whether it's because of the fact that he was really surprised by the fact that Cell was firing a yellow Kamehameha. I don't know why they always color it yellow in the manga, in the full color manga, but nonetheless they did. And it looks like he jumped out and was able to actually get the advantage over Piccolo here. We see that Piccolo is sweating from this whole encounter. That's usually a sign that it's kind of a oh no moment and things are actually getting real. And Piccolo doesn't immediately break free of this either. He still does have his arm drained in the process. So I kind of feel like it's more that Piccolo kind of came up with this whole thing on the fly after he saw the situation they were in, and Cell seemed to believe that he had won. But nonetheless, I think that it still is a showcase of Cell's power and speed that he was able to even temporarily catch this powerful Piccolo off guard. And this is also where Cell explains some of the other techniques he has the ability to do, such as the Genki Dama or the Spirit Bomb that he thinks he could do. I believe in the anime they also have Cell say that he could possibly do the Kaioken, even though we never once see him do it, except perhaps if you want to say that he was using an invisible one, which again, there's literally no proof to ever say that. But nonetheless, the fact of the matter is that this is where Cell takes the opportunity to escape. Now, as Cell is running away, we do get a really interesting scene where Cell is plotting about how he's going to absorb another city until he senses Vegeta and goes and hides behind a tree. Now, Vegeta, when he's flying by, Cell is noticing his power, and he's saying, "Vegeta, why is he here? He hasn't gotten himself killed by 17 or 18 yet? What's more, his power far exceeds what I expected from him. It would be wise to speed up the process." So the fact of the matter is that Cell is very cautious of Vegeta sensing his power right here, and at the same time is saying that he needs to speed up the process of absorbing another city, which seems to be implying that Vegeta here is even more powerful than Cell theoretically. However, with that being said, Vegeta on his way here also says something himself, which is, "One of the two ridiculously high battle powers I've been sensing has suddenly disappeared, but the second one is still there dead ahead. It couldn't be number 17 or any of the artificial humans. They didn't give off any presence at all. So just who's down there?" And of course we do see right here that it's actually Piccolo powering up, and Vegeta is completely shocked by the power of Piccolo on display, which he then goes on to say in his own internal monologue, "That battle power, there's no mistake, it definitely surpassed my own, even as a Super Saiyan. But that can't be, he's just a Namekian." In some other translations it says that his power far surpassed Vegeta's. So we're getting the estimation that Vegeta is in fact weaker than Piccolo, but so too is of course Imperfect Cell, because the fact that Piccolo goes on to fight against Android 17 and is basically even with him, and you could argue he would have been able to defeat 17 with some of his techniques, which I discussed in another video you can see in the top right corner breaking that down. We're also never given any indication that Vegeta actually got stronger after the fight. He took a sensu bean, but then when he went and flew off, he was having another temper tantrum like he often does, and he's talking about that he thought the Super Saiyan was supposed to be invincible and that he was defeated casually and that he should be the strongest in the universe, but then he wonders about whether his biology is inferior to an artificial human. And then in turn he plans to surpass them. So it doesn't really seem like there's any indication that he ever gets any type of Zenkai boost from fighting the androids, or really that any of the Z fighters get any Zenkai boosts really at all moving forward. The only Zenkai boost we even get in the franchise at this point in time is Cell after his self-destruction when he returns at the end of the arc. So again, there's no indication that Vegeta got stronger despite the fact that he fought against Android 18. However, with that in mind, we still do have the scene right here, which could be a smoking gun for the Vegeta side, in which we see that Cell not only stopped his fleeing because he didn't want to be sensed by Vegeta, but then in turn doesn't even attempt to fight Vegeta here. He doesn't attempt to absorb him. He doesn't even see Vegeta as somebody that he wants to mess with. Instead, he senses the power of Vegeta on display. He says that his power far exceeds what I expected from him, and it would be wise to speed up the process. Typically in this case, if Toriyama wanted to convey to us that a character is weaker than somebody else, or stronger in this case, let's say, that Cell would be saying something along the lines of, well, my power is still greater than his, but perhaps I should increase the gap even further, something like that. But at the end of the day, there is no such statement. Instead, Cell runs in the opposite direction, saying that it would be wise for him to speed up the process of absorbing more people and moving himself toward his perfect form. So it seems like Cell is at a disadvantage here comparing his own power to Vegeta's, whereas Vegeta only really sensed Cell at a distance, and even then, he does say that one of the two has a ridiculous high battle power, but the only one that he actually says is stronger than himself, as you could see right here, is Piccolo. So again, this all seems to indicate that there's a chance that Vegeta in the manga and probably the anime is actually stronger out of the two between him and Cell, if even by a small amount. So with that being said, who would actually win? Well, let's get into the conclusion. So Super Saiyan Vegeta before he goes into the time chamber, or Imperfect Cell? Who would win if the two of them fought each other at this point in time? Well, that's something that's definitely an interesting question to ask, and it also depends on the exact point in time. If Vegeta went to fight Imperfect Cell because the fact that he had sensed his power, say, in Ginger Town, and he battled against him instead of Piccolo, I think that Cell would have a slight advantage here just because the fact that Vegeta would not actually know anything about him. He wouldn't know that he has their different techniques and abilities. He wouldn't know that he can regenerate, most likely, or any of the other aspects that he has, like these certain things that Piccolo is caught off guard, despite being even stronger than Vegeta. So it's definitely worth mentioning or worth thinking about to say that Vegeta could have easily been caught off guard if Cell used the Kamehameha or one of Frieza's techniques or something like that, which in turn would cause Vegeta to, probably end up in the same situation where, let's say hypothetically, he got one of his arms absorbed or, he got seriously injured by Cell. Well, there's a strong chance at that point that Cell would be able to win the fight. However, after Piccolo explains to Vegeta exactly what Cell was and everything that happened between the two of them, I think that Vegeta probably stands a better chance of winning because, as I pointed out, Vegeta not only is seemingly stronger than Cell based upon Cell's reaction and decision to run away rather than even trying to attack him or absorb him. The thing is that Vegeta probably also would have thought of some type of strategy in order to combat this enemy so that he would be able to defeat him. And also the fact of the matter is that Cell does not have infinite energy or stamina like 17 and 18. Even after absorbing them, we never get that impression that Perfect Cell has that, for example. So as a result, the thing is that Vegeta wouldn't have to worry about being worn down like he was against 18. He could just spam like his Big Bang attack or, maybe use the Final Flash if he somehow came up with it before he went to the time chamber. He definitely had the Final Crash that he used against Raccoon, even though Vegeta tends to just use his techniques like one time in the manga and then never again for some reason. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that he stood a chance of overcoming Cell after the battle in that case. So, it is definitely a very close fight, and I even did a poll here on my channel where I asked who would win between the two. It was a very close poll, so you guys can go over here and vote on this poll and a number of other polls I have here, but I could definitely see why some people would pick Cell, some would pick Vegeta, because again, it really depends on the circumstances of when they fight, even if some of the evidence seems to support Vegeta in this case. I mean, after all, he does have Vegeta's technique. But alright guys, let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Who do you think would win? Vegeta or Imperfect Cell in his first appearance? Additionally, let me know your own thoughts down below in terms of other videos you'd like to see in the future. Also, if you like this video, make sure to leave a like. Consider subscribing and enabling all notifications so you can stay up to date with all my future videos, and make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing another what-if versus battle that could have taken place during the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z and that particular aspect of the manga. That would have to be Super Namekian Piccolo, after his training in the Hyperbolic Time Chamber going into the Cell games, versus Vegeta as Super Vegeta in his Super Saiyan Grade 2 form. Who exactly would be able to win out of these two fighters? Well, in this video, I'm going to be going in depth into that, bringing up the manga, discussing the anime along the way, and talking about different time periods when these two fighters could have fought each other in the Cell Saga and even before that briefly, and discussing exactly who would be able to win. So let's begin with the first fighter in this battle, which is going to be Piccolo. And we're going to start a little bit back before the Cell Saga begins, so you guys have an understanding of just how powerful Piccolo is, and I'll be doing the same thing for Vegeta. Now, before going to planet Namek, Piccolo, after his death at the hands of Nappa, went on to train with King Kai on his planet during the time in which Goku was on his way to Namek. Piccolo and the others with him got there way faster than Goku did initially, which makes perfect sense because all of them were a lot more powerful after training with Kami. Not just that, but all of them decided to train even harder than Goku did under King Kai in order to get ahead of him after all of his training, including the gravitation training on his way to planet Namek in order to fight against Frieza. By the time that the Earthlings had gathered all the Dragon Balls and were planning to use the wishes to bring everyone back, Piccolo specifically states to Gohan that he had grown far more powerful than when he had actually originally died, which he says right here, talking about how he actually believes he would be able to defeat Frieza at this point. This is what leads to him being brought to planet Namek, in which he encounters Nail. And Nail actually also talks just about how incredibly powerful Piccolo's power is, obviously because power would be powerful, especially if it's unlimited power, like a certain emperor once had. Now remember, Nail had a power level of 42,000, which placed him above the individual members of the Ginyu Force, with the exception of Captain Ginyu. Not just that, but Nail had also fought against Frieza in his 530,000 power level. He had sensed the power of Goku fighting against Captain Ginyu, and a wide variety of other things that had happened up until this point in time. And he still believes that Piccolo is really powerful. However, he doesn't believe that Piccolo would actually be able to win against Frieza unless he was able to merge with another Namekian. Originally, he discusses how Piccolo should have merged with Kami, and he would have brought his power back up to what it originally was, or perhaps much greater. I'm going to discuss that momentarily. Trust me, I'm showing this for a reason, guys. However, Piccolo would go on to merge with Nail, which would give him a massive power-up, even on top of what he originally had before. To Piccolo, it was mind-boggling in terms of the overall ability, and he believed he could defeat anyone. In the case of Frieza, in his second form with a power level of over 1 million, that's going to be the case, as Piccolo had the advantage over Frieza at first when neither of them were going all out, and then after Frieza truly began to try during their fight and using the full capacity of that second form, Piccolo revealed that he was holding back the entire time too, took off his weight of clothing, and in turn was ready to fight against this Frieza, which I suppose means that Piccolo probably had a power level somewhere at least in the neighborhood of 1.5 million to be able to defeat Frieza as confidently as he's showing, maybe a little bit less. He only really needed 20% to 2 times in order to be able to defeat an enemy, and I know that people hate when I say those numbers specifically. But nonetheless, Piccolo definitely believed he could defeat Frieza. However, he didn't really stand much of a chance against Frieza after this point, when he transformed into a xenomorph form and proceeded to get the better of Piccolo and Piccolo's enemy during this particular fight also powered up significantly after this, which I'll get into shortly. Now, after the fight on Namek and the defeat of Frieza, Piccolo was appearing to train in the wilderness. This is something that he also backed up when he showed up to meet with Gohan after sensing the power of King Cold and Frieza on display. Now, of course, after this, the two of them would go on to be handily defeated by Trunks, who would obliterate both of them after the time was done, showing them just how powerful a Super Saiyan could be close up in combat. Both Piccolo and Vegeta also witnessed the power of Goku fighting against and sparring against future Trunks. Neither of them was really going all out at the time, as Goku actually says right here, but the fact of the matter is this gave them a very important thing to gauge their power by. And after this, Piccolo actually tells everyone that he's going to train intensely, and that if anyone there did not consider themselves capable of fighting against the androids, who he knew were stronger than these two Super Saiyans he just saw, including one he just witnessed destroying Frieza and his father, then neither of them or any of them should show up for that matter. This is what led to everyone training for 3 years. Goku training with Gohan and Piccolo, which saw Piccolo get a very large boost I'll be showing you guys shortly, and of course Vegeta also trained during that time, which I'll elaborate more on very soon. Now, after the 3 years of training, when everyone's going to fight against the androids, Piccolo says here that he actually seems confident in his abilities. He says right here, "It's not that I doubt my own abilities, but I can't seem to shake this bad feeling in the back of my mind." So Piccolo here is saying that he's confident in his abilities to fight against these androids, who we had just mentioned before were far more powerful than Frieza and his father, as well as Super Saiyan Goku and future Trunks. And yet Piccolo here is saying that he doesn't doubt his own abilities, and that he thinks that he should be able to fight against them. And we see just how powerful Piccolo actually got when it comes time for him to fight against Dr. Gero Android 20. And we see that he immediately has the advantage over Android 20, with his power having significantly gone up and everyone there being surprised, including Super Saiyan Vegeta. He also explains that he learned the ability to amplify his power in short bursts, which would allow him to go far beyond the power that was absorbed by him by Gero, because remember, Dr. Gero had absorbed the power of a blast from Vegeta at this point, as well as some of Piccolo's energy, and yet Piccolo was still easily handling him and would have destroyed him if he didn't escape. However, the same thing would not be able to be said when Piccolo went to fight against the next batch of androids, 17 in this case, who easily defeated Piccolo, punching an indent right straight through him and making him look like he was made of rubber in the process, and easily one-shotting him. This is what caused Piccolo to resort to desperate measures, by going on to merge and reunite with Kami, the god of the earth, once and for all, taking the evil Demon King and the good god of the planet and making them together united so that they would be the ultimate warrior, the nameless Namekian, who would then go on to fight against the androids. And the boost in power was so significant that Super Saiyan Vegeta at this point in the story says that they're both ridiculously huge, and that Piccolo surpassed him as a Super Saiyan as the nameless Namekian, and in some translations far surpassed him. And all of this was demonstrated in combat when he went to fight against the stronger of the two androids, number 17. Not the strongest, who was number 16 of the trio that was on display, the real trio de Dangerous Dragon Ball Super. And he was able to fight rather evenly against 17, in fact having multiple examples where he could have possibly killed him, such as with his Hellzone grenade technique that 17 was only able to survive unharmed because of the fact that he used this barrier, and then this incredible light grenade technique that he uses, which 17 jumps straight out of the way of, probably because of the fact that he wouldn't have been able to survive it, and is able to do a massive blast, which, like I said, probably could have killed 17, but unfortunately did absolutely nothing to sell, which led to Piccolo getting defeated right here. Now, a lot of people seem to believe that Piccolo stopped increasing his power after this point or didn't go up too much. However, that's actually quite far from the truth, as I'll show right now. Because after this, Piccolo actually went inside of the hyperbolic time chamber or room of spirit and time. And we actually see an exchange between Goku after he had exited from the chamber as a mastered full power Super Saiyan grade 4 before with Gohan, and he talks to Piccolo and saying that he's impressed because he could sense that he got a lot more powerful. Of course, Piccolo then says, now tell me what you're really here for. You're going to say that even though my power has risen, I still can't beat Cell. At which point Goku says, well, yes, actually. However, notice right here that Trunks is pretty shocked, as you could see, and Piccolo is also a little bit embarrassed here because of the fact that he was purposely trying to surpass Cell. But keep in mind Trunks' reaction. Trunks actually fought against Cell when he was perfect Cell, who was vastly more powerful than semi-perfect Cell, who was vastly more powerful than the imperfect Cell that defeated Piccolo that we could see right here. And Trunks fought against him during this battle where Trunks was using his grade 3 Super Saiyan, Ultra Super Saiyan as dub fans like to call it, and he saw Cell's power firsthand even though he wasn't at full power. And Trunks knew that at this point in time his physical power might have been greater than Cell's, only up until Cell did the exact same thing against him, showing just how strong he is. And yet Trunks, who is this powerful and was fighting against a Cell this powerful, is actually shocked and surprised when Goku says that Piccolo isn't powerful enough to defeat Cell. Now, in the anime version, there's a far more in-depth version of this, in which we see that Piccolo actually exits from the hyperbolic time chamber, and when he does, Trunks is completely shocked. You could look at that expression on his face and see that it's basically an anime version that's extending from the manga scene. Now, with that being said, when Vegeta walks past him, he makes a snide remark about how Piccolo is basically taking a nap in there and didn't seem to get stronger. However, that is Vegeta. You could see just how frustrated he is when he goes and shuts the door behind him. He just has his bravado on. He's trying to act like he's still above everything, but it's clear that Piccolo, based upon all the context clues here, is suggested to be more powerful than Trunks, and by extension, probably Vegeta. But let's actually get into Vegeta's power leading up to this point in the story, and then we'll talk about afterward as well. Now, on Namek, because of a Zenkai boost after being blasted through by Krillin, and the active threat at the time Frieza taking over as Vegeta's body healed, which I discussed in a video in the top right corner about how Zenkai boosts work, Vegeta was far more powerful than Piccolo at this point. However, it didn't really prove all that effective because Frieza was just that much greater than everyone else there combined up until Goku became a Super Saiyan. After this, Vegeta witnessed everything that Piccolo did with Trunks fighting against Frieza and King Cold, as well as fighting against Goku. This is what led to him training for 3 years in intense gravity to try and surpass Kakarot under all means that he could possibly do. That he actually had Dr. Brief, Bulma's father, create a gravity chamber which would go up to 300 times gravity in the manga and even more than that in the anime version, constantly torturing himself and training himself under that intense gravity. This is what led to him showing up on the battlefield even more powerful than Goku was after he became a Super Saiyan and was able to easily manhandle Android 19 after he had absorbed the power of Goku on display. However, with that being said, Vegeta did still use a tactic in which he was able to remove the hands from Android 19 because he knew that they were a threat. So you could argue that perhaps Vegeta was doing this just because he was really arrogant at the time and wanted to show off his power, but you could also argue maybe he didn't believe he would actually be able to completely finish 19 just using physical force up until he removed all of the ability to absorb energy. Although a weakened Vegeta was able to destroy him, so you can make that what you will. However, much like Piccolo, Vegeta's power did not prove effective enough against the androids. Now, when he fought against Android 18, the weaker of the two, not by a significant amount, but still stayed to be weaker in all the versions than 17, Vegeta at first was not using his full power. However, after he told 18 to go full power, and then she states that she actually would, as you could see in this panel right here, at first she definitely has the advantage over him and is able to effectively block some of his techniques or just straight up tank them without really taking much damage. However, this wouldn't actually last for long. As 18 would go on to attack Vegeta, he would bounce back and begin to fight fight against her and deal even more significant damage to her than she had shown to deal to him up until this point, to where his blast was able to go right through her force field and damage her clothing significantly, which shows that the blast was able to bypass her defenses. And after this point, the two of them are fighting rather evenly, although you could argue that 18 is still more powerful than the two, up until the point to where 18 was wearing down Vegeta's energy, as Piccolo mentions right here, and then was able to get the advantage and defeat him, breaking his arm, and then everything that happens after that, and, breaking the other arm too. After this, upon learning about the power boost from Piccolo and also about Cell, Vegeta went into the hyperbolic time chamber with Trunks for a year, during which they got a significant boost in power. Goku comes and talks to him and says just how powerful Cell has become after absorbing 17, and Vegeta is completely confident that he'll be able to defeat everyone there, and Cell, of course, too, which he goes on to demonstrate when he shows up on the battlefield and becomes this Super Saiyan Grade 2 Super Vegeta, which allows him to easily be able to dominate and defeat Cell if he did not, continue to play around and then allow him to become his perfect form. Now, after Cell became perfect, Vegeta was not able to do really anything against him in a normal combat. Instead, he had to lure Cell into basically taking one of his attacks, something that he charged up a gigantic amount of time for, and was able to create a new technique along the way, the Final Flash, which was far more powerful than his Gallic Gun or Big Bang attack, and thus in turn far more powerful than what we've seen something like a Kamehameha can put out, and in turn firing it at Perfect Cell, who at the same time was suppressed and basically allowed the move to hit him up until he tried to dodge at the very last second, which caused him to take a significant amount of damage that you could see here. Something that obviously Piccolo at this time wouldn't have been able to do. However, when it comes to the Piccolo who exited the time chamber, there's a much, much greater possibility that he definitely would have been able to do the same thing. And the biggest example of Vegeta and Piccolo's power at this point in the story goes into the Cell games, and more specifically a fight that they have against Cell's children, the Cell Juniors, who were all incredibly powerful and stated in different sources to be equivalent either to a suppressed Perfect Cell up until a certain point, or the Super Saiyans Vegeta and Trunks. However, when it comes time to this fight, we see that Vegeta, Trunks, and everyone is fighting against them, including Piccolo. And Cell makes mention here that it looks like Vegeta and Trunks are the only ones that are fighting back. Since Goku used up his strength, he's in danger too. However, if you notice, in the background we see Piccolo, who is fighting evenly against the Cell Juniors. While Trunks is really struggling here, as we could see, fighting against them, Vegeta is actually taking shots back and forth against them. We never actually see Piccolo take any shots whatsoever on screen in the manga. And as a matter of fact, in the anime version, Piccolo is doing really well against the Cell Juniors, where there's points where he's fighting more than one at the same time. Not just that, but if I recall correctly, in the anime version, Cell also makes mention of Piccolo fighting evenly against them too, just like Vegeta and Trunks are the only ones fighting back. It's likely that he also just mentioned Vegeta and Trunks here because the fact that those were the two that came to mind that had fought him previously in his powered up forms. But nonetheless, Piccolo is definitely holding his own just as well as they are. And as we could see right here, Piccolo, Trunks, and Vegeta are the only ones who are left standing at this point after the fight against the Cell Juniors. And we have to keep in mind too, when it comes to the power of Vegeta and Trunks, both of them went into the hyperbolic time chamber again for a second time. In the manga, as far as we know, Piccolo only went into the time chamber once. And when Piccolo went into the time chamber, he was already stronger than Vegeta and Trunks. So if anything, all the depictions we're seeing here seems to suggest that Piccolo is actually around the same level comparatively to Vegeta and Trunks when they're powered up at full power after they went into the time chamber a second time, which shows just how massive a boost Piccolo must have gotten inside the time chamber. And we also don't know what form Vegeta and Trunks are in right now. It's entirely possible that both of them actually mastered Super Saiyan inside the hyperbolic time chamber, which is something I'll probably do a video about on its own in the future, because it is a question question worth pondering. If they did, that shows just how massive a boost Piccolo got even more, because a lot of people speculate that those forms have greater multiplier. I don't know if I would say that, but again, another video I'll talk about in the future. I got so many ideas, guys, trust me. The only things that we could really say to suggest that Vegeta might be more powerful than Piccolo here are when he goes to attack Cell after he rages out at the death of his son Trunks, which leads to Vegeta actually causing super perfect Cell, as we could see right here in this top panel, to brace himself from Vegeta's attack. Vegeta then proceeds to use Vegeta's technique, but then we see that Cell is not damaged at all and proceeds to knock Vegeta down to the ground. Then later on, during the final key clash with Cell, it's actually Vegeta who blasts Cell and knocks him temporarily off guard, whereas Piccolo and the others were blown away by the Kamehameha and didn't even attempt to fight back. In the anime version, they all did, but none of them seemed to be effective in actually doing anything to Cell, whereas Vegeta did. Whether you can make an argument that Vegeta actually got more powerful after Cell killed Trunks and retained that level of power after he attacked Cell is a totally different discussion for another day, but nonetheless, we do see that Vegeta was able to distract Cell, leading to Gohan being able to annihilate him and win the day. So with that being said, who is actually more powerful out of Piccolo and Super Vegeta in this storyline, and who would win a fight between the two of them, as well as, let's even say, between the two of them at this point in the Cell games? Well, let's get into that in my conclusion. So who would win the fight? Super Vegeta after his first day in the hyperbolic time chamber, or Piccolo after his first day in? Well, based upon all the evidence that we seem to see, it looks very likely that Piccolo was more powerful than Super Vegeta when he fought against Semi-Perfect Cell. A lot of people, for some reason, don't really seem to believe that Piccolo got that big of a boost, but based upon everything I had just shown during the course of this video, it seems clear that he did get a very large boost, and if anything, was actually competing with Super Saiyan Vegeta, who might have been fully mastered and full powered in grade 4 at that point, and Trunks when they were fighting against the Cell Juniors, and doing just as well as they were. Not just that, but also in terms of overall techniques, Piccolo does have the Makanko Sapo, for example, and the light grenade that he would be able to use on top of a possible power advantage over Super Vegeta. Not just that, but also, if we want to talk about Vegeta's techniques, not just Vegeta's technique, but also the Final Flash, for example, maybe you can argue that he'd be able to increase his power enough to blast against Piccolo, which would be able to overwhelm him despite a power difference like we kind of saw with him and Perfect Cell. But again, Piccolo is able to regenerate just like Perfect Cell, and we even have Cell making a big deal out of that. So I feel like in this case, Piccolo would definitely win there. However, if it came down to a fight between Piccolo and Vegeta at the Cell games, obviously that would be a lot closer. And I think the power edge would go to Vegeta in that case, as it is made to seem like Vegeta is stronger in both versions overall, and he plays a bigger role in the defeat of Super Perfect Cell actually at that point in time. So you could argue maybe Vegeta would be able to win some fights, or most of the fights actually, using his techniques and brute strength. However, you could argue that maybe Piccolo would be able to also win some of the fights with the special beam cannon, catching Vegeta off guard, and using different techniques and tactics that he learned along the way. However, this is the point where you guys tell me what you think down below in the comments. Who do you think would win out of these two at different points throughout the Cell saga? Not just that, but also, if you're new here, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications. That way you could stay up to date with all of my future videos just like these. Also, make sure to leave a like, share the video out. Thank you all for staying and watching for this long. You guys are awesome, and make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future. Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing another what if versus battle that would have theoretically occurred in the future Trunks timeline of Dragon Ball Z. This would be a battle between future Gohan, the master and mentor of future Trunks, and future Trunks, the very first time that he showed up in the story, slicing and dicing Frieza. Who is actually more powerful between the two at that point in time, and who would have been able to win their battle? Well, as I always do, I'm going to be going in depth into this using the manga and anime where needed. And additionally, I'm also going to be presenting the strengths, weaknesses, and everything on display for both fighters to make the ultimate determination about who would win this fight. So let's begin with future Gohan, the first character in this battle who is the mentor of future Trunks that we could see right here in the History of Trunks, or Trunks the Story section of the Dragon Ball manga, and also in the anime. Now, let's keep in mind, with regards to the manga, the chapter that we see future Trunks and future Gohan appearing in their future, and don't take a shot every single time I say future in this video or else you're going to die, this was only a half chapter, which in turn means that it was nowhere near as expansive as even a regular chapter would have been, and not just that, but wasn't exactly multiple. It was just one that was set in the manga around the time of the Cell games. Now, in the future, we do see Gohan, who in his base form, with just the one arm, is able to fight and spar with future Super Saiyan Trunks. Someone, as we could see, clearly isn't anywhere near as powerful as you would expect a Super Saiyan to be, but then again, this might be a fight, rather than being one of physical force, is rather one that is more about controlling the energy of the Super Saiyan. Either way, Gohan, the next panel, says that he believes that Trunks would be able to catch up to him in just a few more months, which plays a big role in this, guys, so, stay tuned for that. And also, in terms of his overall power, he probably did become at least a little bit weakened after he had lost his arm, because as we saw in the future, or really in the past, depending upon your perspective here, Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2 was said by himself to Goku in the afterlife that he had lost half of his chi when his very same arm, in fact, was broken by Super Perfect Cell's attack. And in the manga, we never actually see what happens. In the anime, it was during a fight between future Gohan as a Super Saiyan against the Android 17, and then Trunks as fighting against, in just his base form, against the Android 18. Gohan flew in to try and save him. Then they used a area of effect attack, and as a result, Gohan lost his arm and barely survived. Now, one thing that we have to point out too in terms of Gohan's power is that Trunks says that Gohan looks a lot like his father when he's wearing the gi, which is something he heard from his mom. At that point, Gohan says that he wears it because he hopes that he could be as strong as his dad before he passed away. But it's not as easy as it seems. So in other ways, it seems like it's implying here that Gohan is actually weaker here as a Super Saiyan, even after this training and stuff, than Goku was when he died in the future timeline. But just how powerful would Goku have been? Well, let's find that out in this video. So in terms of what level of power Goku would have been, it probably would have been something akin to what we saw from Goku after he returned from planet Yardrat. Now, at this time in the original timeline in History of Trunks, when Goku returned to the Earth, what happened was he actually killed King Cold and Frieza, which I discussed in a video you guys can see in the top right corner about how that fight played out. In fact, he was already actually going to do that in this timeline until he sensed Trunks' energy and decided to just wait until his ship landed on the Earth normally. Now, when Goku became a Super Saiyan, he was able to go up against Super Saiyan future Trunks. I'll expand upon this a lot more in depth when it comes time to get into future Trunks and his overall power. But nonetheless, Goku at this point in the timeline would not have been vastly more powerful than he was here. Because in the main timeline and the unseen timeline, after future Trunks showed up and explained the threat of the androids, everyone trained for 3 years in preparation for them. And so Goku as a Super Saiyan trained with Gohan and Piccolo. Vegeta trained in the gravity chamber, trying to catch up to not only the power of Goku, but also of future Trunks after he experienced his power firsthand. And all the other Z fighters also trained to get so much stronger, so in turn they would be able to defeat the androids, or at the very least not get killed in the future. However, in the future Trunks storyline, this is not what happened. Rather, they had no idea any threats stronger than Frieza were ever going to show up, and so it's likely that at the most Vegeta tried to catch up to the power and surpass it of Goku from Yardrat, but not just that, but also Goku wouldn't have gotten any significant gains because why would he? What was he really preparing for? Any life or death battles? Not quite so much. So as a result, Goku wouldn't have been that much stronger than Yardrat Goku by the time that he died, and thus in turn Gohan here is weaker than that. In terms of just how strong Gohan would have been, well, we don't know that for a fact, but we do get another inkling of Gohan's power in the manga version. And that's after he becomes a Super Saiyan and then attacks Android 17. Now, Gohan went into this battle not expecting to survive. He actually says this right here to Trunks, where after he knocked him out, he tells him that if he were to die too, which means that Gohan is already saying he's gonna die, there will be no one left to protect the Earth. Someday, Trunks would be able to defeat the androids. Another thing worth noting is that Trunks makes great mention of Gohan's arm, saying that with his arm gone, he probably stands less of a chance than he did before, which only makes sense in terms of hand-to-hand combat and overall levels of power. And as I mentioned before, with Gohan as a kid in the Cell games, losing theoretically half his power, assuming that wasn't all a mental block, which I've discussed in videos in the past. Now, according to Gohan, he's been training hard in order to defeat the androids at this point, and he actually believes that he would be able to defeat Android 17. Now, this is the really important part, especially in the manga version. At this point, Android 17 tells Gohan that he was only using half of his power the last time the two of them fought. In other words, Gohan trained to get up to a level that was maybe a little bit stronger than half of Android 17's power. And thus, as we see, when Android 17 goes at full power to attack Gohan, saying that he won't escape and that he's going to die, Gohan in the manga doesn't even have a response. You could see on his face, it tells the entire story. He knows he's going to die. This is a, well, I'm dead moment. And so too does Android 18. Now, in the anime version, as you guys can see, Gohan puts up a significantly better fight than he did during the manga version, where he gets killed entirely off screen. In the anime version, he's able to fight against both the androids at once and even overpower both of them with a ki blast at one point. So he has a far more heroic type of ending and resolution, and it seems that Gohan in the anime special is way more powerful than the Gohan from this one, where it seems like he might have been able to kill future Android 17 or 18. And also discussed in a video that you guys can see in the top right corner whether or not the future androids were actually weaker than the main timeline ones, because there's definitely a lot to play into that, such as the scene that we could see right here, where Trunks was actually unconscious during the scene in which Android 17 revealed to future Gohan that he was only using half his strength the last time they fought. So 3 years later, when Trunks is the same age that he is when he goes back in time, now 17, he goes off to fight the androids, and during that point, he gets defeated. And he just assumes when he goes to the main timeline that the androids were probably going all out when they defeated him. However, that isn't true, because for all we know, they were using the same amount of power that they had used against Gohan before with regard to Trunks. So with Gohan's manga and anime power explained, let's get into the power of future Trunks at the time. Now, when Trunks shows up in the story, the first thing that we see is him killing the various different henchmen of Frieza, followed by the Emperor of the Universe and his father themselves. And we know that Frieza at this point is actually stronger than he was when he fought against Goku on Namek. He says right here to his father, if the two of us work together, we're sure to defeat him. But now that I've powered up, I could likely take care of him myself. Now, of course, Frieza cannot sense energy, so there's a chance that him saying likely and him still planning to team up with King Cold is implication that he's actually weaker than Goku on Namek. However, there definitely is a strong possibility that that is not the case, and that maybe he's stronger than Goku was on Namek when he actually shows up on planet Earth in order to fight him with his father. Nonetheless, after becoming a Super Saiyan, future Trunks is still able to easily defeat Frieza and his father. Now, with that being said, we're never really told that Frieza went full 100% power in terms of like everything he can give. In the English anime, he does say, oh, here's full power and stuff like that. But nonetheless, when we actually see him here in the manga, he just goes to attack Trunks without even powering up. He doesn't have his aura around him, anything like that. We don't see him bulk up at all with at least the non-mechanical enhancements. So there's an argument to be made here that Frieza never truly went full power when Trunks killed him. And not just that, but Trunks also caught Frieza off guard, blasting at his feet, causing him to go up in the air, and then just chopping him up after that point, and then vaporizing the pieces. So again, Trunks didn't exactly fight Frieza in a battle like Goku did. He just went for the kill as quickly as he possibly could. He would also do the same thing against King Cold, who is dumb enough to think that Trunks only won because of the sword, and then in turn, he goes on to kill him as well. Now, a lot of people do assume that King Cold is stronger than Frieza. I talked about that in a video you guys can see in the top right corner. Nonetheless, the fact of the matter is that Trunks was definitely more powerful than the two of them for sure, and probably more powerful than Goku was on Namek here. But at the same time, when Trunks went off to fight the androids, his power was compared to future Gohan's, who, according to Bulma, questions whether or not Trunks was actually stronger than him at the time. And we can make the assumption that maybe he was stronger here by the time he goes off to fight, where he's even saying that things will be different, which of course they don't end up being. But again, Gohan here is stated by himself to probably not be as strong as his father was before he passed away, and we already established how strong that theoretically would have been. Now, later on in the story, we get a direct comparison between the power of Goku and future Trunks, where we see both Goku and Trunks become Super Saiyans and begin to spar with one another. At first, Trunks went to slash at Goku, but Goku didn't do anything because he detected that Trunks was not going to hurt him because he doesn't have any malicious intent. At this point, Trunks says that he's actually going to hit Goku with this blade, and then in turn, Goku goes to infuse his ki into his finger so that he'll be able to match Trunks' sword. At this point, this is what we see, where Trunks is slashing at Goku, and in turn, he isn't able to hurt him. Even saying here that it's amazing, the stories I've heard about you are really true. No, you're even better than the stories. And he says, this is the same sword I used to slice right through Frieza, at which point Goku says, that's only because you weren't trying your hardest. So these are some things that people really overlook this statement here. Goku says that Trunks actually wasn't trying his hardest here, whereas he did with Frieza and King Cold. He didn't hold back because he wanted to kill them as quickly as possible and eliminate their threat, because future Trunks, at least in this arc, doesn't mess around. Not just that, but a lot of people assume that Goku just infusing his ki into his finger automatically makes him way more powerful than future Trunks. But the truth of the matter is that's also not really the case, because when you think about it, what is Goku doing here? Well, he's doing basically the same things that Trunks does, where when Trunks goes to attack somebody, he's instilling and infusing his chi, his ki, directly into his blade. You could see right before he goes to swing it at Goku, his ki is enveloping the blade with his aura, which is basically making it to where he's hitting Goku with a weapon which is filled well with ki. And so basically when this is happening, this isn't a battle between Goku's finger and its durability versus Trunks and his blade and the sword, but rather instead, it's actually a battle of the two and their ki. And as Goku says right here, Trunks wasn't trying as hard as he could because, well, obviously if he did and he messed up and he killed Goku, that would kind of ruin the entire trip and he'd have to make another timeline where it also did not kill Goku, and maybe he did this right before this and he's like, we went through about 4 Gokus before we met you. But at the same time, Goku wasn't really going all out either. So we know that Goku is no doubt stronger, at least a little bit, than he was on Namek, even though most of his training went to learning how to use the Shunkan Ito, or the instant transmission, and just being able to tap into Super Saiyan whenever he wants to. Whereas with Trunks, we don't know just how much stronger he might have been than Goku on Namek, but again, It's arguable that the two of them are in a similar tier of power because neither one of them was actually going all out. And this is something we actually get direct confirmation of, because despite the fact that Goku trained for 3 years as a Super Saiyan, and Vegeta also trained to become a Super Saiyan, go past Goku and his power that he sensed when he was fighting against Trunks, as well as Trunks' power, there's still an implication that Trunks isn't too far away from the other Super Saiyans who trained for 3 years. And how do we know this? Well, this dates back to the fight first between Android 18 and Vegeta, and then when everyone jumps in. Now, when both Vegeta and 18 are going full power according to their own statements, which I talked about in a video you guys can see in the top right corner, Trunks was amazed by the power of Vegeta on display, saying he didn't realize just how powerful he was and that he was holding his own against 18. However, as Piccolo says, Vegeta is going to lose because of the fact that Android 18 was wearing him down, and that even though Vegeta, maybe he wasn't the exact same level of power as 18, he was still able to put up a fight against her, and the main reason why she eventually wins is because she wears him down, starts to deal more damage, and then in turn breaks his arm. This is what leads to Trunks jumping in to try and save him. Of course, at this point, it doesn't really fare well for him or anyone else. Now, interestingly, you could see that when Trunks goes to swing at Android 18, his sword actually breaks on Android 18's forearm. It does do a little bit of damage to her clothing, as you can see it goes there and damages it, which means it was able to get through her defenses when she's already in the middle of fighting and powered up. But it's a little bit similar in a sense to what we see right here with Goku and future Trunks, in which Goku is blocking Trunks' sword because of his own level of power. Trunks, however, unlike in this case, actually does try against Android 18. One of the ones he says is stronger than his own future versions. Nonetheless, he's still one shot and everyone is taken out. And after that happens, when everyone is revived using the sensu beans, what happens is that Tien makes this statement, which is in regard to the power of Trunks. And he says, "We're talking about the man who's able to kill Frieza without breaking his sweat. And even he wasn't a match for the artificial humans. We need to face the facts. No matter how strong Goku might be, he won't fare much better than Trunks or Vegeta did." So it seems like Tien is implying the power of Trunks is still within the realm of power of Vegeta, who stayed to be even stronger than Goku at this point, as I discussed in a video you guys can see in the top right corner. And not just that, but also Goku, after 3 years of training as a Super Saiyan after he had already fought Trunks. So even then, Trunks still is implied to be in the same level of power, and we're never given any indication that Trunks actually trained in the 3 years between him going to the future again, then returning to the present, or whatever happened there. I actually plan to discuss that even more in depth in a video, but we don't know for a fact that 3 years actually passed for Trunks, and nonetheless, there's no real inclination or impression that he's gotten stronger since the last time we saw him. So everything we're seeing here is actually saying that Trunks is likely more powerful than future Gohan in this point in the story. That whereas future Gohan was said to be weaker than Goku in both the anime and in the manga version, and we see that he was maybe a little bit stronger than half of Android 17's power, if that, at this point in time. In the manga version, at least, it's implied that Trunks is more powerful than he is. Now, with regard to the anime version, you can argue based upon the feat of Gohan fight against Android 17 and 18 that he is more powerful than everyone in the Cell Saga at this point in the main timeline, with the exception of the androids. It might be more akin to like Super Namekian Piccolo after he merges with Kami, in which case he would easily be able to defeat future Trunks, Goku, and Vegeta at the same time, considering just how big of a boost there was for Piccolo at that point, to where he was not only able to fight against Cell when he first showed up, but also was able to fight against Android 17 and would have beaten him at points if not for the barrier. So with that being said, who would actually win out of the two of these fighters? Well, let's look at that in my conclusion. So future Gohan versus future Trunks from his initial appearance. Who would actually win? Well, there's another factor we didn't consider here, which is, what if Gohan still had his arm, and he had the same level of power. Well, I think at that point that he would stand a far better chance against Trunks, but in the manga continuity it seems clear that Trunks is actually more powerful than future Gohan was. If we're talking about the anime future Gohan versus future Trunks, then there's far more of an argument to be made that he would be able to win there, even with the single arm, just because the incredible feat of power we see him using against the androids. Maybe you can argue that they were still holding back until they finally went full power at the very end and killed him, but even then, the fact of the matter is that he shows to be stronger than all the Super Saiyans at this point in time, even if you want to say the future androids are weaker, and thus as a result, should still be able to defeat Trunks, especially if he had two arms with that level of power at that time in the anime version. So it comes down to a difference in adaptation. But what do you guys think? Let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Also, if you're new here, consider subscribing and enabling all notifications so you can watch all my future videos and see that much more. Make sure to leave a like, share this video out with your friends. Thanks for staying the whole time. You guys are awesome. And make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Throughout the Dragon Ball story, we've seen a number of epic and incredible fights.
Goku vs. Piccolo, Goku vs. Frieza, Gohan vs. Cell,
And Gogeta vs. Broly
are only a small selection of the great fights from this iconic franchise. However, there is one incredible fight that all of us missed. This fight was never shown in the anime or manga, and took place not in the main timeline, but rather in the future Trunks timeline. That fight is future Goku versus King Cold and Frieza. But how exactly did this fight go down? Well, in this video, I'm going to discuss that. Now, in the beginning of the Android saga of Dragon Ball Z, we discovered a shocking fact. That Frieza had survived his battle against Goku on Namek, and had been rebuilt by his father, King Cold. Even worse is that Frieza set course for Earth, and Goku had yet to return to the planet as he was training on Yardrat. However, Goku sensed that Frieza was on his way to Earth, and quickly jumped in his space pod before trying to get back in time. Unfortunately, Frieza's ship was much faster and made it there first. Frieza and his father touched down on the planet with a number of his soldiers. Only the Z fighters stood in his way as he ordered his men to wipe out the people of the Earth. However, they were completely outmatched by Mecha Frieza and King Cold's incredible power. With it all seemingly hopeless, a powerful warrior made his sudden appearance on the battlefield, wiping out Frieza's soldiers in an instant. This warrior was Goku. These are the events that likely transpired in the original timeline of Dragon Ball Z. Despite being 3 hours away in space, Goku sensed Frieza's presence on the planet and showed up just in time to save the day. The way he did this was through the use of his newly acquired technique, the Shunkan Ito, or instant transmission. The ability of instant teleportation, which can take Goku across the universe and even to other dimensions. The reason why we know that this would happen is because Goku said as much to future Trunks after he dispatched the Cold family in the main timeline. Now, it's possible that the Z fighters could have handled the Frieza Force soldiers on their own, which would be a nice way to work them into the action. However, at the time, they were still far removed from where Frieza had landed, and were attempting to suppress their power to avoid detection and a direct fight. So I think it's a likelihood that Goku would have shown up and dealt with Frieza's men, realizing that they were a threat and needed to be destroyed. This is when the real battle would begin, as Goku would go head-to-head with the evil tyrants of the universe. But how would this battle unfold, and would Goku do well against the two, just as Trunks did? Well, as for this part, I believe it would unfold quite differently than the fight with Trunks. This comes down to a number of reasons. Firstly, Goku is a different kind of fighter. Unlike Trunks, Goku wouldn't have simply wiped them out when they weren't fully on guard. He's a fighter with honor, so he would have wanted to fight them head on. As a result, he would give them an equal playing field. This is where the next reason would come into play, which is that King Cold and Frieza came with a game plan in mind. As we saw when they touched down the planet, Frieza and his father were speaking about what they were going to do. Cold said that he didn't care about the Earthlings, but wanted to stamp out the Super Saiyan no matter what, as their clan must always be the strongest in the cosmos. Frieza replied, "With the two of us together, it will be no trouble. I could probably do it myself, since I have grown even more powerful." Now, neither of them knew exactly how strong Goku was at this time. However, this does inform us of their game plan, which is that the two of them would fight together against him. Now, this is in stark contrast to what we saw unfold in the main timeline, where they fought Trunks one by one. Because Trunks was more powerful than either of them individually, this put them at a significant disadvantage, especially when they had no idea that he was a Super Saiyan until right before the fight began. Many fans have argued over the years that Frieza wasn't using 100% of his power when he fought against Trunks. Considering that he didn't attempt to use any of his real signature moves and simply used a normal ki blast, I'm inclined to agree. Furthermore, Frieza didn't bulk up his remaining body parts like he did on Namek, nor did he power up for a considerable length of time. King Cole didn't do this either. Instead, when it came time to fight, he mistakenly believed that Trunks was able to win because of his sword, so he attempted to use it against Trunks, which resulted in his death. Smart move. However, with Frieza knowing who Goku is, I think he would probably go all out from the start, with him likely charging into the fight first because of his mental state after his defeat, where he was suffering clear symptoms of PTSD, as shown by what happened when Trunks transformed. This is where Goku's power at the time comes in. Now, there's been some speculation over the years about exactly how strong Goku was at this point. He had spent around a year training on the planet Yardrat after becoming a Super Saiyan. This training was split between him mastering the ability to transform at will and learning his instant transmission technique from the Yardratian people. Also, something about spirit energy according to the Dragon Ball Super manga, but I'll get into that at some point in a future video. However, it seems clear to me that Goku also became physically stronger after his fight against Frieza. He demonstrated this during his sparring match against Future Trunks. After defeating the two villains in the main timeline, Future Trunks met with Goku, and the two of them transformed into a Super Saiyan for a test of strength. At first, Trunks unsheathed his sword and faked an attack against Goku, who was able to see through Trunks' ruse, not taking any measures to protect himself. This is when Trunks said he wouldn't be holding back anymore, and Goku followed Trunks' lead, infusing his energy into his index finger just as Trunks did with his sword, and he managed to parry all of Trunks' attacks with ease. At this point, Trunks complimented him, saying that he not only lived up to his reputation, but exceeded it. Now remember, Trunks was able to kill Frieza with his sword, cutting through his flesh and whatever space-age material his robotic components were comprised of. This is a Frieza who is confirmed to be stronger than he was on Namek, and Trunks killed him with ease. Now we don't exactly know how much stronger he was here, however it must have been by a decent amount. After all, if his power went from 120 million to 121, I doubt he would have mentioned it. And again, Frieza believed he could potentially win on his own. Of course, Frieza is arrogant, so it's within his nature to think that he could win. But this could also be an indication from Toriyama that Mecha Frieza surpassed Goku's power level on Namek, which is entirely possible.
If Dr. Gero could make androids stronger than Frieza, then it's reasonable that Frieza's best soldiers would be able to make him at least an extra 30% stronger.
So clearly Trunks must have been stronger than Goku was on Namek, since that version of Goku couldn't have killed Frieza so easily, especially not a stronger version of him. Now after their clash,
Goku says that Trunks wasn't trying as hard as he was when he killed Frieza.
So Trunks was suppressed to some degree.
However, I would still give the edge to Goku since he didn't exactly go all out either. Regardless, this means that Goku would have performed even better against Frieza in combat.
So Goku would have been able to easily defeat Frieza even if he went full power. Now the next question is, would King Cold make any difference in the fight? Well, we know that Cold is powerful based on a number of statements in the anime and manga. Some of these statements also imply that Cold was more powerful than Frieza. For example, a statement that Tien makes in Dragon Ball Z Kai. Where Cold ranks is somewhat debatable considering that Frieza wasn't fully powered up at the time. But for the purposes of this video, let's just say that he's stronger for now. Even with this in mind, I don't think it's very likely that the power difference was considerable. This is for a number of reasons. The first reason is the most obvious, which is that Goku won the fight. It's not exactly like Goku was 10 times stronger than he was on Namek at this point. Even a few times is pushing it, so Cold's power couldn't have been many times Frieza's. And considering he lost, it must not have been comparable to Goku's either. Based upon how Trunks easily caught his swing with the sword, we can pretty much confirm this. So at the most, I'd say that he's 20 to 50% stronger than his son. This means that he would be at a significant disadvantage against Goku. And despite the two of them teaming
teaming together, it likely wouldn't have helped matters. At this point in Dragon Ball Z, power was pretty much everything. Less powerful opponents couldn't simply overcome a huge strength disparity through teamwork alone. As a result, Goku would take the father and son team on at the same time and dominate them in an awesome display of strength. Naturally, with the two of them firing giant blasts at him while he tanks them with little to no damage. I like to imagine that the two of them spent some time on their voyage to Earth coming up with combination moves. So it'd be pretty awesome to see each of them charging up a giant death ball and then combining them into one the size of the moon and throwing it at Goku. But he would probably pick that thing up just like Trunks did and chuck it right back at them. At this point, I think that Goku would finally see the error of his ways in the decision that he made to spare Frieza on Namek, considering that Frieza ignored his advice twice and tried to kill him and then his entire world. Goku would no doubt realize that the two of them could not be redeemed, and so he would put an end to them, perhaps even using their own technique against them, like how he defeated Cooler, or maybe by beating them down and destroying them with his Kamehameha. Either way, I don't see much chance of them surviving in this version of the story. But then again, there is still one chance left for them, which revolves around a question that many fans have wondered ever since Cold's death. That question is, can King Cold transform? Now, I've discussed this in a number of previous videos, but honestly, based upon the evidence, I think he should be able to. After all, Frieza transforms, Frost transforms, and even Cold's non-canon son Cooler transforms. So if pretty much every other mainstream member of his species transforms, then it makes sense that he could as well. And knowing Goku, he seems like the one person who would allow this to happen. This was demonstrated when he allowed Frieza to reach his 100% power on Namek, because he wanted to beat him at his best. So wouldn't Goku also want to see King Cold at his full power? It seems likely. And so Goku would behold a sight which no fan of the Dragon Ball franchise has gotten to see, at least outside of fanfiction, as King Cold transformed and reached his full power. But even then, his full power wasn't enough to defeat Goku. Despite how powerful Frieza became as he went from his most constrained form to his full power on Namek, it's highly unlikely that Cold would get that much more powerful. Because again, we know that Goku won this fight. And as much as I like this idea of this uber powerful final form King Cold, who can somehow fight Cell and Majin Buu, it's simply not the reality. And whatever increase there was must have been minor. King Cold is older than Frieza, so it's possible that he has greater control of his power in his lower forms. As a result, he wouldn't need to suppress it anywhere near to the same degree as Frieza. So all of that fits in with the outcome. As such, King Cold would transform, arrogantly believe that he could win, forget about sensing energy if he even had that ability, and then proceed to get owned by Goku, who would stomp a mud hole in him like Stone Cold Steve Austin, before flipping him off, giving him the Stone Cold Stunner, and then totally vaporizing him. And with that, the threat of Frieza and his father would come to an end, just as it did when Trunks fought them in the main timeline. And that is how Goku won the greatest unseen fight in Dragon Ball history.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you're interested, you could actually hear me discuss all of the greatest and biggest versus battles in the Buu saga of Dragon Ball Z, which will be down below in the description in the top right corner. And as I've said before, make sure to subscribe, like, share, comment your own thoughts down below, and stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.